We need to approve and get out of here on time, and then,
All right, so we're gonna pick up,
wait, you have to whack the gavel or it doesn't count.
someone wanna whack the gavel?
Something made noise.
We just commenced.
Okay, so the work session has commenced. Denise will be with us shortly. And we're gonna pick up this work session where we left off last week and go through some of the remaining code items that we didn't get to last time. And this is item legislative file LEG 18-00001, Development Code Amendments, including equitable housing, work session number 4. And so last week we had discussed the comprehensive plan goals and policies and city commission goals and policies. We also discussed multifamily housing and commercial building standards. And tonight, we're going to work through several other things. The first item that we're talking about is in your code packet on page 311, and this is the master plan. Under the current code, the master plan, the way it's written, it's tailored towards institutional development and institutional zoning. I'm going to turn this house lights down so they can see the screen a little better. And it was not tailored to residential developments very well. So what we're talking about with a master plan is bringing back a planned unit development type review process, which is more flexible. One of the things that this is going to do is remove the current requirement for institutional developments to be at least 10 acres. So the idea is that you could do this type of proposal, flexible planning commission review and decision for a smaller site as well as a larger site. We would also propose not having a minimum duration at all, but you can go up to 20 years. So making the overall arching general development plan for a site up to 20 years with no minimum. We're adding some sections to clarify the review process, such as what right now, if someone proposes a master plan, they can also request adjustments to the city code. It's kind of like a variance. It's just called a master plan adjustment, and that would stay. The other thing that this would do is, and this is coming out of the Equitable Housing Project, is to allow a master plan or a planned unit development as a voluntary thing for anything bigger than 2 acres. So you could do a residential PUD type thing for any site that's over 2 acres in size.
2 is minimum?
Minimum, yeah.
So, just to be clear,
Yeah.
when you say a residential master plan, you're basically saying subdivision.
Well, your subdivision would be could be a phase of the master plan. So this would allow someone to phase in let's say a bigger proposal, phase in your public improvements and specify the timing for when the streets and the sewer and that sort of thing was built. What we're adding into the master plan code as far as residential standards are some open space requirements, considerations for the mix of housing types so that you could do more than just single family. You could get a trade-off in density for open space dedication on trails and parks and that sort of thing. This is going to be a quasi-judicial review and decision by the Planning Commission.
So, why is that different than a subdivision?
Well, subdivision right now only has a 2-year approval with an extension up to 1 year. So you've got to basically build it or build the public improvements associated with it within 2 years of land use approval. And this would allow you to do a longer time phase and say your first phase is phase one of a subdivision. It's basically the same thing. You'd be doing a subdivision approval along with the master plan. So you'd have a
It seems
concurrent
like-
subdivision
It seems
review.
like redundant paperwork then.
Pardon?
It seems like you're asking them to do redundant paperwork.
Well, there's a different part of the code that governs the criteria for a master plan. They'd still have to do a subdivision and meet the minimum standards, but they could vary some of those standards under the PUD process.
Well, essentially, a subdivision is just one instrument to allow an exchange of
division.
property through purchase and buying. You gotta record a particular,
Yeah, a subdivision is a
it's just a legal document.
preliminary plat review.
Yeah, but, okay, so the PUD, are we looking at in terms of mixed use to say, it doesn't have to be platted because there's not gonna be an exchange of property, exchange of title? Say, maybe there's gonna be some commercial and some apartments that are gonna be leased instead of sold and maybe institutional.
Yeah, it could be.
And it would all be on one piece of property because nothing's gonna be, bought and sold. But, so it wouldn't have to be platted, particularly, would it?
Well, I think the way the master plan is set up, you have a general development plan for all of the phases.
Yeah.
And then you have a detailed development plan for an individual phase that you're building right now. And you'd have to plat that individual phase in order to sell lots.
Yeah,
And
well,
then-
that's my
and then-
point.
and
What
then
if you
have
don't
a
want to sell
larger-
lots?
And then have a larger phase for future phasing for future subdivision.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is what if you don't want to sell lots?
Well, if you just want to do a commercial site as part of it, as a mixed-use development, is that what you're talking about?
No, I think he's talking about you build all the houses and you just rent them.
You know, listen,
Yeah.
you see, what I'm seeing around the Portland area is a whole different approach. And I think we're entering into a marketplace and a financial system where we don't have to plat everything. And we're getting into this mixed-use plan development mindset to where we can achieve a lot of different things either in a neighborhood or on a large scale. And one of the things I think, and I think you'll all agree, is this country's getting older. And assisted living is the new style of living. Well, that takes a whole different mindset.
it's like a
How are we
campus.
gonna, and I think on the way over to Lake Oswego, there where Merrillhurst was,
Yeah.
that big development in there.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna be, I don't think that's platted, and it looks like just a bunch of
Well,
apartments.
it's on the Merrillhurst campus.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's part of their, that's
Yeah.
why I quite honestly think that's why the university failed, because they realized their land's worth more
yeah, yeah,
than
yeah.
it is as a,
Right, well, this is what I'm getting at,
Yeah.
is it, and the marketplace determined that this property is getting more valuable than we can afford to hold on to in its vacant state. So as a result of that, we see new land use proposals being made all the time. And this planned development, I think, is gonna be an instrument to achieve that. And
Yeah,
not just,
be more
not just
flexible.
necessarily through subdivisions. up-
Right, yeah, this is an alternative to having to do a subdivision.
Yeah, okay,
Subdivisions are typically a type 2 review, meets clear and objective criteria, meets the land division requirements, meets the zoning code base requirements, minimum lot size, setbacks, all that. That goes through public comment, and then we issue a staff report. This is a public hearing situation, and it's gonna be more of a negotiated zone district with the city. And it would provide some flexibility, much more flexibility than a type 2 objective process does.
I just, I don't see the point in it. I mean, if I've got 4 acres and I want to just put houses on it, why would I master plan it? Why would I go through that effort when
Right.
potentially the solution is to get rid of the 2-year window and change it to like a 5-year window?
So you're just saying just plat it,
Yeah, just,
just like we do now?
yeah, I don't see what the benefit to me with 4 acres would be to master plan it. I don't,
Okay.
I
Well,
just,
you wouldn't have to. You could just go through the subdivision
You're,
process.
you're saying if you just own the 4 acres,
Mhm.
no other, yeah, why would you put a master plan for 4 acres if the intent is to develop that 4 acres to basically subdivision?
All right.
But I think the master, what you're looking here is with the master plan and the PUD, you or somebody else, you may have partners and all of that that own 20, 30, 40, 50 acres. Then, and you want to start someplace and you want to start financially in a section that you can build a few houses, let's say, without doing all the roads and the infrastructure and all that for the rest. But how do you put this into priority that the master plan is going to have some institutional and it's going to have some commercial and all of that? Is there a sequence you have to follow, or can you start with residential with a big master plan around it and just keep adding residential, residential, residential? At some point, you have to branch into something else to
You
give
don't.
you the concept of what you were trying to come up with, institutional or parks and rec and stuff like that.
again, I don't see what the difference is between that and a 20-acre subdivision. Because you still gotta put the roads in, you still gotta put the parks in, you still gotta, if it's just gonna be residential and not mixed use, I don't see why anybody would go through the master planning process.
A lot of the benefits for master plan may come through the variety of housing choices. So what you saw in the proposed code amendments was that single family attached would be allowed in the single family, in like the R10 through R6 zoning designations as low density residential. So you can get a plan that is sort of like one that shows on the screen, so you get a variety of housing types.
But couldn't you just do that anyway in your subdivision?
No.
You can only do, through this draft now, you can only do corner duplexes. And that's it.
You get more flexible options to start with a master plan and a PUD that gets you a smaller zone, possibly more density than you would if you just went to a subdivision.
Or not more density, just different.
It doesn't have to be more
open
density,
space
right.
component in
Right.
relationship to the smaller size zoning designation. So it's just options for people. You heard
Okay,
from our
well, I
technical advisory team.
I know, but based on what you had said, for whatever audience we may have, that's why I wanted to get past this. Why isn't it just an extra layer of paperwork on top of a subdivision? If you said the purpose of this is to make things easier, why would I do another thing? But if the other thing is, I'm building houses with built-in ADUs, or I'm wanting to do a 3-4plex for one of my blocks, or whatever. And that's why I'm not just doing a, R10 single-family residential. So I wanted you to say that, so it would be,
Does the master plan and the PUD, does that still have to be under the concept plan? But overarching of that, everything, you have to have it go through that concept plan to put that in place first. Then the master plan.
Yeah, master
with more
plans have
flexibility.
to show compliance with the comprehensive plan, and the
Yep.
concept plans are part of the comprehensive plan, so there would need to be findings for whether it meets South End concept plan, or Park Place concept plan, or Beaver Creek Road concept plan, yeah.
So you still have that control over it that you just don't
Yeah, you
Start.
still have that control.
You've got to have the concept.
Well, what are the
supports it,
controls
and
that you-
Then you have some
Absolutely.
flexibility.
I knew the answer, I was just trying to get them to say it.
which is absolutely necessary, is the layout of public streets. Access, no matter how big the
Good color,
master
Denise.
plan or PUD is, you're still required to have that access.
Right, and access could take public street
what you do in a
dedication,
large
or if it were a
subdivision, too.
mixed-use development, it might take
But you may get,
a private street network that was developed to a public standard. It could. It would be flexible, you know.
Do we do that, does the city do that often?
we're-
The last
we're on
master plan that was
sheet.
approved
We
with
just started
a
this
private
first line.
street network was the Safeway redevelopment.
They did not recognize.
So that
you
was
need to
a
flip it
master
on the
plan
same
because
side.
it was
I'm trying to put
individual
this in my
phases.
binder.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and those are not platted interior
That's why I
streets.
stayed with the big
Those are private street networks.
But it was developed on city standards.
Well, I-
Yeah, it has a sort of a block layout with sidewalks on both sides and
Realized.
good access control and stop signs in the middle and all of that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
And we also had a master plan for the Clackamas County Housing Authority, which had some private streets too, but it was primarily a residential one.
Okay,
They never went forward with it, but it was approved through the planning commission.
And then there's the cove down by the
Riverside.
Yeah.
river, yeah, which is a
It's
mess.
only taken a million years to complete.
Okay.
So, this first bit about remove requirement for institutional development over 10 acres. So, does that mean, an institutional development with 15 acres does not need to do a master plan anymore?
Yes,
Yes.
so what we had is, we had the cemetery that wanted to do, like, say they
Must
want,
be the code.
say they wanted to do a small addition, and they would have to go through a master plan to do that, because the size of the property is so large.
So, why shouldn't they? They're public institutions,
Yeah,
shouldn't
I
they
think-
have a master plan?
Yeah, I think that you need to not put
I
that
mean,
in,
it's-
we don't support that. If it's an institution, whether it's a hospital, the city, the county,
Well, see, here's the,
they need to be, continue to be accountable. Maybe there's some way on this that you have a minor addition of some sort, or something that's minor. But I think that taking,
Well, the problem is the
Taking-
cemetery's never done a master
well,
plan.
yeah, hold on, can I, 1 second. So, yeah, we have a requirement that says institutional development over 10 acres requires a master plan. So what we have a lot of in the city is institutional property that may not want to further develop. So what you would see is someone going through a master plan process just to do something very, very minor. And so with this, we're just allowing some flexibility so they're not forced to go through a master plan process. They can certainly elect to go through a master plan
nobody's
process.
gonna elect to go through it.
Well-
If it's not required, they won't.
Well, it depends what they're doing because there are benefits to master plan process. So certainly newer ones will elect to it because as Pete was talking about, it allows you to phase that infrastructure as well. It's just, the problem is if Parks Department wanted to do something good for the city and do some,
Stop. We're not putting value judgments on it. Good, it's not good or bad. If they want to do something, then again, it's what I've been complaining about is that why don't we have a citywide facilities plan for our facilities? If this is something that will get the city or the county or anyone else, good, bad, or indifferent, that's not us to determine whether it's good. The master plan process will determine whether the development that they're proposing is adequate and meets the city's requirements. That's what we're talking about, not good or bad.
my apologies
Yeah.
for putting a value judgment on that. I certainly didn't mean to.
Oh, I
What
know.
I meant to say is, an example would be the cemetery because they were looking at potentially doing something on the cemetery property. And it didn't matter how modest that thing was, it would require a lot more cost and process than to do that thing. And what we think is, it's up to the criteria. If the criteria, that's what we're here for. We're not here to create a master plan process for
whatever value it has or not. We just want to say, if you're gonna do a small addition, does that small addition meet the criteria for the small addition? You don't have to do a master plan that says, hey, this is the only thing I wanna do right now. I don't have any plans to do anything further. It's not going to, in other words, if what the city wants as a policy matter is a facilities master plan, the city should have a facilities master plan. If you have existing institutional facilities, in Oregon City, we have a lot, not just city, but other large institutional places. And if they just want to do some minor tweak, this is a bit of a barrier to invest in our community.
So
Well,
is,
my response to that is cemetery, parks, public works, whoever,
county, city,
school,
school,
this forces them to look ahead and think ahead up to 20 years.
But it doesn't. It just says you have to do a master plan and you don't have to, you just have to have a master plan. You don't have to have invested in the community vision for what you want in the
Right.
10 years.
Well,
You
then
just
why
I
need to
understand
say
say,
that.
but see, that's just it. If they have to go through the master plan process, then they might as well think ahead rather than just react to everything that comes along.
I can't,
And that gives them, in some cases, it gives them the ability to say, sorry, knee-jerk reaction, we can't do that, it's not part of our master plan. But the other comment I have is, if the issue is minor tweaks, then why don't we instead put in something that says, if the area affected is less than 5% of the total acreage, or if the value of it is below, then a master plan is not required.
it'll be well, that's assuming they have one, then it's a minor amendment, so we have.
Well, no, but that's just, a lot of the older institutions don't have a master plan.
Right.
But if that's the fix, I think then we need to fix that.
Yes, I would agree.
But I don't like the idea of master plans going away.
For institutional
Right, I
development.
think
Well,
public.
for
anything.
Yeah,
anything over
public
10
entities
acres.
need to be transparent and accountable. If it's a governmental agency, whatever it is, the Clackamas Water District, Tri-City Sewer, I think it's an obligation for us to take a look at what they're doing and what the impact is in our community. Good, bad, indifferent. I agree with you. If we need a minor tweak to this to say if you're doing X, then here's what you do, rather than eliminating it. I just think that eliminating, the requirement, again, may get them thinking, because, let's say they do 2 or 3 little tweaks. Well, when does the 2 or 3 tweaks become something that's cumulative, becoming something a little bigger? And I think staff would say, hey, look, you can't keep doing these little things. You need to really look at your process comprehensively. There's got to be a way that we can do something in this to create sort of like a major and minor partition. We have those. If you're only doing X, then it's a minor process. If you're doing Y, then it's major. So let's put something in there for that.
okay.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying. For instance, when the cemetery put in the monument for the murdered children, that wasn't part of the cemetery's thing. I assume that's kind of what ended up triggering hey, they were trying to do some stuff. And if they want to build a new shed to house all their equipment and, or store, headstones waiting to be installed or whatever, that's got to be a minor amount, in the overall scheme of things. So I think if we put less than 10% of the overall acreage, less than 5% of the, total value, whatever it might be. The cemetery is kind of weird because there's not a lot of infrastructure to value, as opposed to, a school who wants to put another wing in. But I think that if that's the issue we're trying to fix, I think we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, well, I think if they hadn't been able to cohabitate with Public Works, they would have been putting in a fairly major facility there to house their equipment, their lunchroom, whatever. I mean,
Right.
it was going to be a fairly large development. They still may do some some rehab there, because that house, I think, is beyond its.
Well, it's a house, it's not an
life-
office, it
right,
needs to be
it's
an
beyond
office.
its life cycle.
In all transparency, the
So-
city property is very, very small of the institutional properties of
Right.
10 acre. It's mainly not. I
I'm
mean,
thinking about like
where you
the
have public
hospital, I'm
works
thinking
and
about the
that's it,
hospital,
really.
which is
Yeah, the hospitals, the
Huge.
schools.
You know, when I look at
the
development, I
county,
don't
oh,
care.
yes, the county, absolutely,
Because they got a
campus.
chunk of campus there, and
Yeah.
I don't know when that master plan was developed, but it could have been developed 15 years ago, and they had no idea 15 years ago what they were gonna put on the corner of Beaver Creek and Warner,
Whatever.
Millie Pear.
Yeah.
So it's really long-range planning.
Sure.
That you just, today you can't define everything that's gonna go into that, the county's
No, but they can
facility up
define,
there.
they can define
because-
building,
Yeah.
you know, or wetland.
They've been
or-
talking
Oh,
about
yeah,
building
you
the
still have
courthouse
that.
for 20, almost 30 years now. So,
Right.
someday we're gonna replace this so we've known that. It's a matter of
When and
where,
where.
when and where.
So we're gonna come back to you with some thresholds for what should trigger a master plan besides including the acreage requirement. I just want to be clear, what other thresholds should trigger that?
I think we ought to have something in there that says, if a master plan has never been created for whatever it is, that maybe there's a way, without making a huge financial burden, that we can look at some sort of phased master plan development that would help, for instance, the cemetery. Let's just use them as example. There's never been really an overall master plan for the cemetery. Let's say that they are gonna buy more property, which I know they'd love to get the rest of that stuff along Hilda. And they want to, let's just say, build 2 or 3 more mausoleums or something. I don't know, I'm just making it up. There's never really been a master plan for that, so how is building 3 more mausoleums going to affect, traffic? What's the impact on the adjoining residential properties, because it's residential? There's some way that there ought to be, to help institutions get to where we'd like them to be in the future. I'm just thinking there's some sort of little caveat that if no master plan has ever been developed, then the city will work with you to create some sort of a phasing plan for the overall development of whatever it is. And these are probably institutions that have been there for, since Moses was a pup. So we don't want to penalize them in any way or feel like they're being put upon to do a master plan when it's not in their budget, but maybe looking at something, 3 to 5 year look
Okay.
of, what do you think, you might do? Because obviously at some point in time, Mountain View Cemetery is going to get
Full.
full. And, are they looking at in the future, I mean, we don't want to freak people out, but let's just say they decide they want to buy both sides of Hilda. In the future, if money was no object, then you got people starting to get freaked out, but I mean, I shouldn't say that. No, they're not planning to buy anything on Hilda Avenue.
Okay.
But some idea of how to help them look at what they're doing comprehensively.
And just, since you got the code in front of you, 176530,
What page are you on?
312.
Okay.
A, you lined out everything except required for large institutional uses, a master plan shall be submitted for any development. So you've left the requirement for any development to have a master plan. Had to highlight all the words that weren't lined out in order to read
Yeah,
the
okay.
sentence.
That's an oversight.
I hope I still have my highlighter in here. I've been
Thanks.
using it for this stuff and.
And then, as always, you're welcome to give us hard copies of your
Yeah, that's a
comments
good
too,
point,
especially edit stuff. But that's a good one, but
So within this section is where we come back with these various scenarios.
Have we got anything in this document that decisively outlines what public policy is? The point I'm trying to make is, the purpose of a master plan, as we put together, and a zoning
Purpose and
ordinance.
intent statement, right at the beginning of the chapter. Is the intent of this chapter to foster the growth of major institutions, major residential, commercial, and mixed-use development, and other large-scale development, while identifying and mitigating the impacts of such growth on surrounding properties and public infrastructure. The city recognizes the valuable housing options, services, and/or employment opportunities that these developments bring to Oregon City residents. The master plan process is intended to facilitate an efficient and flexible review process for major developments, support innovative and creative land development, and to provide long-term assurance to plan for and execute developments in a phased manner. That's the first part of it. Master
On
plan
page
process.
311.
Pardon?
You're reading on 311, that's where I am.
Yeah,
Yeah, at the beginning, page 311, that's right. To facilitate this, the master plan process is structured to allow an applicant to address the larger development issues such as adequacy of infrastructure and transportation capacity and reserve capacity of the infrastructure and transportation system before expenditure of final design costs. The master plan process is further intended to promote efficiency in land development, maintenance, street systems, and utility networks, while providing site layouts that integrate usable and attractive open spaces, site circulation, and the general well-being of the site users.
Yep, I agree with that.
Well, I don't think it goes far enough.
Where should we go?
Public policy should include not only transportation, as you referred to, but also parks, environment,
Open space.
open space, noise, air pollution. These are all matters of public which we have the responsibility to address. Now, I don't care what you do on your property, as long as it does not affect public policy. It's our responsibility to define it so that everybody
It's clear.
recognizes it and understands it. And I mean, if we gotta dumb it down to the third grade, let's do it. Because when I go in and look at an ordinance, and I have to bring my attorney in to interpret it, or my architect in, prior to my even making an application, that's going way beyond a reasonable approach.
and I think a lot of what Laura and Pete are doing is making it the common man's.
Well, yeah, and I commend them for that, but what I'm saying here is, at this commission level, we have got to be responsible for defining what public policy is. And we've got to keep our nose out of things and get out of the way and let free enterprise in the marketplace work. Because if we keep interfering, and we do interfere, we do that in very subtle ways,
Well, sometimes very overt ways.
Yeah,
Like you gotta have some stack cleaners
And sometimes we listen to attorneys here, and I'll be doggone. You know, my subsection is better than your subsection, okay? And they'll quote a subsection, I have no idea what in the heck they're referring to, because I don't have it in front of me. I'm just trusting that they do, okay? And we all have a bit of larceny in our heart. We all want to win. And sometimes I'll do anything I have to do to win. And that's largely big business corporations and things like that.
Okay, so you would add these other things to the purpose and intent?
No, I would, what I'm asking for is for this commission and the staff to relook at what we're talking about when it comes to public policy as it refers to the comprehensive plan and then as it refers to the zoning ordinance, which we're involved in here and we've made some progress. But identify those things outwardly and conclusively and so that everybody can understands, that's a new word. Everybody knows what they're talking about, knows what I'm talking about. If it doesn't include those things, then just get out of the way.
So are you saying you'd like that to be like page 1 of the comp plan?
Yeah, page 1 of the comp plan and page 1 of the zoning ordinance. These are what the city of Oregon City is concerned about. And it doesn't have to be in that language.
Right.
Our charge, just like the city charter, our charge is to administer at this level, the planning commission level, through our official documents, the comp plan, zoning ordinance, and what have you, the following matters of public policy: streets, parks, institutions. Now, the
Sewer, water.
public's going to understand that, and this is our business.
Bob, I think, as far as master plans go, all of that is dealt with in the approval criteria for the master plan, which talks about exactly what you're talking about. Public infrastructure, open space, consistency with the comprehensive plan. That's on page 318 and 319. So those are the criteria that ensure that the master plan is consistent with the comprehensive plan and any other ordinances that apply to it from a public standpoint.
Yeah, they added you don't have your big fun packet in front of you. That's what's in here.
And then Pete's also posted the agenda for the next meeting, which does include.
Yeah, so
app-
that's a good point. We just posted the agenda with the recommended findings this afternoon, so that's going to be our initial set of recommended findings for you to look at when you.
This one is just a touching the
This is-
spots and get everybody
Yeah,
kind of
this is Try
calibrated
to
to,
get your head around the
the master
entirety
plan.
of the amendments.
but the
and,
details are,
Yeah, well, the details are in here.
Where the W-
and-
Yeah.
but that's for, I think, what Pete is saying,
Yeah,
the next meeting when we,
well, I
I listened to
don't know
the
if I'm ready
mayors
for
of
findings.
the
We haven't gone
metropolitan
through this
area
entire thing.
talk the other day, and they're all saying the same thing: simplify, 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 and get to a scale of government that we can deal with the problems confronting us. And one of them is the homeless, and they all agree you're not going to do it city by city by city. It's a regional problem. They recognize that, and government and its problems
Well-
are getting more and more complicated. And hopefully we can reduce that complication through what Pete's trying to do here with Laura.
Well,
And I think we're on the right track, but
yeah, well, I mean, part of the thing is that I understand what you're saying about get out of the way, but if you go back to the very beginning of planning, the Euclid case, that's why we have codes, because otherwise, with all due respect, it's why we aren't going to end up like Texas.
well, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying
Yeah,
we.
no, we're not, I know you're not saying throw it out, but it's a little hard to get out of the way when a community is interested in having its community be a certain way. And if X, Y, and Z person comes in and wants to do development, then they need to conform to whatever the requirements are that jurisdiction is, because that's what's in the best interest. It's been determined that's what's in the best interest
What
of that
did I
community.
say that leads you to think that I don't mean it?
No, you were saying like we should get out of the way, so I don't know what we're getting out of the way of.
Huh?
Well, he's saying make it simple so they're not spending 4 days reading the code trying to figure things out.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But but then once they meet the code, then they're gonna go do their thing.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think we have any problem with that, but we're gonna go down that road with them.
I just say the only difficulty I have with simplify is
Too simple.
that almost all of these codes, whether they were in legalese or not, exist because somebody jerked the system around.
I know.
And somebody's trying to stop the next guy from doing it. So I want to make sure when we're simplifying that we're not reopening some doors that we clearly
Closed.
intended to be closed.
Throwing the
And
baby
some
out
of
with the
them
bathwater.
needed to be closed for a while. Kilo 111, we're not going to build with that anymore, whatever.
T-111, yes.
But now, we can, maybe we can open that door because, they've got, nice hardy planks and they've got this and they've got that. And so, if we originally had a code, no wood siding, then, we need to, that's what's good about this. We get to reevaluate to see if that door needs to stay closed. But I want to make sure that those that were closed and bricked up and then buried under 100 feet of dirt don't get reopened. Because clearly there was a reason why we went to those steps. But in general, I agree with you. I looked at some of the stuff and initially it was 460 or 1765 and then 1718 and then 1750 and it's like, I'm going to some other city. It's just, I just spent 3 days cross-referencing and a lot of what you've done is wonderful because it is 90% in one spot and it only refers you generally to one or two other spots. So yay for you guys.
Thanks.
But yeah, that's definitely, we need to smooth the process out without necessarily,
Throwing the baby out with the
Yeah.
bathwater.
Right. Okay, so on to height measurement. Proposal here coming from the project advisory team from the committee was to remove the maximum stories, so we no longer have a story measurement
And
and just
why
go
was
with
that?
feet. Reasoning was that we never used that provision in the code. We always measure from finished grade to the midpoint of a roof. And is, most of the time, that is more than adequate to govern building height.
I
And it's a lot more objective.
We do use it, it's just to neighbors, the height is the height, and that's a more true and honest telling of a building height than number of stories that
yeah.
maybe like
Because if I
top
went
down.
large vaulted ceilings in an open concept, I only have one story, but it's 45 feet up to that peak ceiling.
Yeah, and we're not, I mean, Pete will talk later, I think there's like 17 more of these slides, but he'll talk later about proposed height changes, but in all cases, except for mixed use downtown, we're not proposing to change the height number, just remove stories, because it seemed a bit redundant.
Yeah.
And not as needed.
Do you want to talk about the mixed use downtown height while you're on it, or is that it coming
I
up?
think it's like the next slide.
Okay.
Well, before we get off of that, since a lot of the requirements in the conservation districts talk about not to exceed 2.5 stories or 35 feet or whatever the number is, or can't exceed the height of the
Oddfellows Hall.
tallest building, which is the XYZ building. How does that relate?
This does not at all trump any design districts for historic. The historic overlay still applies on top of all of this. We're just measuring the number for the planner who intakes that home, but it still goes through the historic review board the same, and the standards for historic review board are still the same.
So the
This does
HRP
not affect
districts
that.
will still have stories in them.
Yeah, we're not touching them.
Chapter
Okay.
1740, which is,
That's fine. I
yeah,
just,
Yeah.
that's not
because that
changing
overlay
at all.
for those stories, you're gonna keep that in there because you're not touching that.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're not
Okay.
touching the design guidelines.
It's hard to describe a building that would meet that standard without describing it with X many stories.
Sure, yeah, no.
It's,
Because the window placements and all that
Right,
stuff
all
that
of
happen.
that, yeah.
No, that's,
you're not gonna have
I just wanted to be clear that
a silo or
that
something like
historic
that.
districts still refer to stories. This is just non-historic districts, so you're taking the stories out, but still keeping the max height in place.
Yes, the design standards.
Right.
and the second the definition of height would be changed to include that in the floodplain, the height would be measured from the floodplain or from the street level if the
Street is higher than
street
the
is
road.
higher. Yeah,
So you're using the example here of the proposed hotel.
Correct. And that indicates that, the street finish grade is below, and then the base flood elevation is above that.
And so, and this, when you're measuring the height from the base flood,
Yeah,
Yes.
Would a good example be that, that building there on Washington across from Abernathy?
even the Providence Training Center.
Is that's what it's called?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Is that a good example?
That is a good example.
Okay.
Yeah. So habitable spaces, meaning ones that have people in them on a permanent basis, would have to be built above that, but parking can be built below.
So give
That's
me,
not changing.
give me the reverse, give me the unforeseen circumstance.
Oh, there's a few situations where the street grade is such that it would be I can't give an example. Where would that be?
In Willamette
Willamette
Falls,
Falls.
it's the opposite.
Yeah.
The floodplain might be below. The
Yeah,
bottom of the
that's
building
right,
would be
yeah.
below.
Because it cuts half through the site.
Because yes, half of
Yeah.
it goes to the site.
Yeah,
Yeah, but,
it's pretty rare.
yeah. So then you would measure the higher of the two, is really,
So those buildings across from Tony's Fish Market down there, they're below the floodplain.
Yeah.
Are they considered non-conforming to that element of the zoning ordinance?
They would have to be.
yeah, in the flood overlay management district.
Okay, so-
If you do larger additions or build new buildings, then they have to be flood-proofed or elevated.
Remember those old FEMA maps we used to look at?
Mm-hmm.
Tells you where the flood lines are and whatnot.
So this standard mitigates some of that, so you can't build within certain portions of your property or the airspace of that. So this standard will allow you to do that. You would still get your full building height, you're just measuring it a
If they
little
wanted
higher.
to add floors over a certain amount, not that they would, but they could potentially benefit from this new definition.
So in order to get those buildings to conform, they'd almost have to be raised and rebuilt to a new standard or to the existing standard.
Yeah, because it's actually the 96 flood, they were,
Inundated.
the ground floor was, and they were actually just got to the second floor.
So new uses coming into there, like that bakery across from, that new bakery down there at 15th and in Washington. How do they gain occupancy when they're in a floodplain like that?
They're a business, so there's no residents.
Well, if you do a certain percentage under the building code, so not in the planning realm or our flood overlay district, but in the building code, if you do a certain amount of addition or tweaking of existing space within the floodplain, then you start to have to do incremental improvements.
You see, that's what I'm talking about when I say public policy. I think that we have a legitimate right to address that as a public interest
Yep.
and apply the appropriate standards. I have no problem with that, because in some cases, you could be dealing with life and certainly property, but,
Yeah.
Okay. Second slide with respect to height here. So the proposal here, right now, mixed-use downtown has a 75-foot height limit, except in certain areas. Within 500 feet of the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center, properties within 100 feet of a residence, and the area that we're looking at right here between Main Street and McLaughlin Boulevard, between 11th and 16th. The proposal is to remove that height limit, which is 45 feet, and make it the standard for the zone, which is 75 feet.
And you're keeping the properties within 100 feet of a residential zone? That's staying? You're
No.
eliminating that?
That would
Why?
go away. Go ahead. I actually need a little background on this.
This is the only,
My concern is that you could have some, so we're only talking about development within this blue area?
no,
No.
there's
What's
two
the-
different
What's
standards.
the blue area then?
So there's two things that we're proposing to remove this lowered height limit from 75 feet to 45 feet. The one is the area in blue, which is that block. We can talk about each of them, so maybe we'll just do one at a time. So for this block, I am not entirely sure why it is lowered, but I can say, let's start stepping back onto a bigger picture, looking at our comp plan and other things. This is a regional center, it's our mixed-use downtown. And in general, if you look at all the heights, they're very haphazard. Between having properties within 100 feet of an existing residence, which is the only place in our code that where we talk about existing residents as opposed to zoning designations, and this reduction here, for a mixed-use downtown, for something that's supposed to be a regional center or more of an intense use, it seems strange that there are places where the height is reduced. And there's not a really good explanation about why it is reduced in certain locations.
I suspect
the-
it had something to do with river views.
Yeah.
and
Well,
being
but
at-
how, I mean, our whole city's on a hill. We know
Well-
the bluff is about that height, so, you could still, it's not like the height will block the view from the bluff. In other words,
Well, not the
the
bluff, we're talking
75
about
feet.
down there.
the 75 feet, though, is about the height of the bluff. So what we're saying is below the bluff, it's all the same zone, it's all the same height, not different heights, not a tiered height. Like we don't have a tiered height in what we would think of as our downtown between, 10th and Willamette Falls Legacy Site. And no other places do we have these view corridors or the tiered heights. This seems to be the only place in the city where we are
should.
concerned about that. And its effect is to reduce the overall effectiveness of our mixed-use downtown. And also, the 100 feet from a residence, there are some properties on the backside of Center Street that are residents, but they're not zoned residential, they're zoned other things. And so that, if you're measuring within 100 feet, it captures a lot of property that also has frontage on Main Street. So we're limiting the height of properties also on Main Street. So you're basically limiting the height from Main Street to McLaughlin from 75 to 45. And a lot of properties are limiting the height from Main Street back to Center, also that same width. And we want to make sure that we're equitable and fair. And it seems strange that we would have lower heights in one part of our city when we're a whole city on a bluff, and in no other places along that bluff do we have those reduced heights. So we, again, want to make sure that we are fair to wherever the heights are, so we don't give someone a reduction in some place and somebody else not a reduction in another place, but we're also balancing the fact that it's a regional center, and then it's our mixed-use downtown. It's our downtown.
Well, that's the point. It's our downtown. We just won a prize, I think, for,
Not for this part.
But still,
Our downtown, the part that got the Main Street was from 10th,
okay.
not this part.
Well,
It was part of it because it was within our regional center.
Well,
Yes.
my point being, do we want to create a canyon down there?
Well, that's my concern, that we don't create a canyon down
Yeah.
there.
That, I preach about free enterprise and all that kind of stuff, but, boy, looking up that river, I'm telling you, it just amazes me, the value of that vista, looking up that river. And, I don't know, is that what we want for downtown Oregon City?
well, that gets to the whole thing. There is value to that vista, and those extra 30 feet, 3 stories of potential condos means, large bucks, because they're gonna have an unobstructed view of the river, because there's
And-
nothing but the road and the promenade on the other side.
Do they get to see the
Not-
205
Not on this part.
bridge?
The other thing too
I'm
is
just talking about the area that's,
a large portion of this project is to provide housing opportunities.
well, and the block between 11th and 12th, I can definitely see. I mean, we've got the KFC and we got an empty lot, and it's right there at the bus stop. So I definitely could see,
Do we want a 75-foot tall building there?
well, if that isn't the epitome of affordable housing, I mean, you can't get any closer to transit than your
no.
front door. So,
I support, I feel indifferent about this. I think we should, I don't want us to end up looking like Division Street, which is this canyon of buildings, and there's lots of shade and
Portland's Division.
shadow. Division in
Portland's
Portland,
yeah.
which is now a canyon.
Yeah.
It is very depressing. It is not at any scale that you'd even want to walk down
And,
the street.
and I don't want Main Street to turn into Hawthorne.
I think some parts of Main Street could be part of Hawthorne, but not the big, tall, giant
Yeah.
buildings. We have a river view, so if you're building, so I understand that there's somebody that's possibly looking at building on our parking lot, which I'll say off the record, not what I really think about building on our parking lot since we need parking. And they're proposing a really tall building. So so the people on that backside are gonna be fine. So they build something and then the next person comes in and they build a 70, so now you've got another building, you're looking at a building. And I think when you have an asset like a river, you need to do this and step down to the river to where we're not completely compromising one of the major
Yeah.
assets we have in this
You have a
community.
valley, not a canyon.
Yeah, look at this zoning map and all of that green area is mixed use downtown.
Oh, you think I
There's
can see that
no-
from here?
There is no stepping anywhere. This is the only place. And I'm not sure why it's here. Why
The
does this
existing
get to be
core-
stepped and other places
The
don't?
existing core, which I consider 10th to 5th, that's already built out. What we have down on this end is sort of a mishmash of stuff.
How high is the Masonic building?
56?
There's that's 50 set, so nothing is higher than that.
Well, I understand that,
Yeah.
but that's only, I mean, if it's only 56, then why would we go to 75?
That's the height limit from 10th over.
Design
Which is
district.
appropriate. It is appropriate to help preserve the historic look and flavor of our historic core.
And that's written in as a
Right.
design.
Right, and that's written in the design because
And-
that was
and-
why we did that.
And to me, that's our canyon height. We've got from 1st to 10th, although 1st doesn't, but you know what I'm saying, from the Willamette Falls to 10th, we've got a height limitation. And why would we then, just because you hopped over a street, add 25 feet to that?
Well, that's what it is now. The thing that I'm concerned about are these properties within 100 feet of a residence because it's haphazard.
I don't know what that,
It
So,
basically means that they can't put up a big old, that's what I'm talking about. They're
but they're not in the residential zoning designation is the
understand, but there's
problem.
a
They're
couple of
residential
historic
and
properties
commercial
down there.
zoning designation.
Yeah,
And that's why it's
but we did
haphazard.
that to
They're
them.
non-conforming.
They didn't come in and build a non-conforming house. We made their house non-conforming.
Yeah, it's just the only place in our zoning code at all that we refer to a use of a property and not the zoning designation. So
Well, there's
say
a
you,
reason. Because
No, it's
there
not
are-
the only time, because
there-
twice you say, existing industrial uses shall be exempted from. Twice you do that in this code, so.
no,
that's-
no, but we list out specific properties where those
You need to tell me
exemptions
where
are for
that is, 'cause
industrial.
I had a
That's
concern
true.
about that.
191.
But in here, we're saying properties within an existing use of residential. So say you want to build, you're gonna have to go like survey everyone's property, and most of the residential uses are on top of the bluff, which take out, artificially reduce the
How
height
far-
of building up below the
How
bluff.
far is 100 feet? To me, I thought 100, so you've got Center
Well-
Street, which is a 60-foot right-of-way, right? That's 60. That puts you in that first line of properties where I can see 1210, 1214, 5, God, I can see if I can read that,
So that would
501,
be-
505. To me,
But-
that's within 100 feet.
That's true,
It
but,
doesn't go any further than that.
no, but it's on above a hill, a bluff, and then on the other side of a street.
Those properties are not on,
But so like the problem is, so if you're looking at that map where it's 13th and Main, that big property.
these are not on the bluff.
No, she's explaining, on top of the bluff, if it's 100 feet, it's 100 linear feet, not an angle. So if I've got a house right at the top of the bluff, I destroy that first block of building where they could build 75 feet up and still be below me, but they can't because they're within 100 feet of me. So,
Like the creamery building would have to be 45 feet, it couldn't be 75 feet. I mean, there's a lot of buildings that expand, also span from Center Street to Main Street, so
I
it takes
really-
out that whole block.
I don't mean to be disagreeable, but I think that portion of Center Street is down at the railroad tracks. That is not the bluff.
right, and she's not saying it is, but
But
she's.
yeah, but like, I mean, the more that way you go, it depends where you're talking on Main Street, we're just picking
I'm
examples on the
talking
map.
about this part that you're talking about from 11th.
Yeah, she's talking about the blue
16th.
box.
So I think there's 2 points. Okay, so the blue box is different than properties within 1,000 feet or 100 feet of
Yeah.
a residence.
But what is
There's-
it you're trying to achieve and what's it gonna take to get there? you know, if we're looking at this in conversationally like you would a comp plan where it's just legislative and not quasi judicial, and this is a work session, so it's not a public hearing, but what is it we're trying to achieve? And if we're left to me, I think that one of the assets that you just can't put a number on is that river.
Protecting the view,
Protecting
right?
the view of that river, not just for people downtown, but for the whole doggone region. I mean, that's an asset that you're just not going to replace. We've got to do something to protect that asset. Now, that's where I'm coming from. That's what I'm trying to achieve. And what's it going to take to get there?
Well, the only place where the likelihood that the properties in downtown, the historic downtown, would be adjacent to the bluff and 100 feet are the houses along the McLaughlin Promenade. This is not there. So I'm still having a very hard time understanding what the problem is, because the houses that are down along Center Street on the other side, you can't see me pointing to this, the other side of the rail, on the, where the rail trestle is, and then you can drive under there, under that part of Center Street. There are some, but they don't hit Washington Street. They go in maybe, so I'm trying to think linearly from that property, from let's say 1220, and I measure from that property line over 100 feet.
You know, so, sorry, we're talking about a couple different things. So I think fundamentally, it's a little haphazard to have a requirement that says properties within 100 feet of a residential have a different height limitation. There's just no plan, because
So-
we don't have those mapped with what they are. Just saying.
So I'm saying,
The other thing is
why is
that
that a problem?
a lot of the properties, because we're a regional center, and we want to also provide housing opportunities, which was a crux of a lot of this project. I forgot to say that these did go to the advisory group.
I don't really care.
Well, I mean,
They're
you were
not-
there.
they're
I mean,
not-
we've been
I
doing this
understand
for a
that.
year with
I know,
them.
they're
I
not-
want
they're not
to
the ones-
honor
They're not,
what
I
they
understand,
said.
but we don't have their recommendations all laid out in a nice little neat pile. They're making a recommendation to us, and then we have to sort that out and say, well, that was a good recommendation, or no, we don't agree with that recommendation, or wherever we want to go.
Well, I guess my question is, and I'm not able to see it from this, so maybe that's what we need for the next meeting, is a plot of the map of the residences with the little 100-foot circle around
I
it.
don't have one. We don't have one.
Well, there, you don't even know if you have a problem.
We know that there are places, we know, like, if Ice House wanted to redevelop, theirs would be 45 feet because they have that long tax lot. It's the long tax lots that get reduced height on Main Street. So the
Why would
non-Riverside.
Ice House be reduced to 45 feet? Where's the residences within 100 feet of them?
There isn't
On the
one.
back, on Center Street, that Denise was talking about,
That's more than 100 feet.
No, but it's not from the building, it's from the tax lot.
Yes, I'm looking at the tax lot
No, it's
12,
just the right of way with the Center
1200.
Street.
I'm looking at tax lot 1200, which is where the Ice House is.
No, it goes back though and touches Center Street. So the Ice House,
Well, I don't know
The
what the
one
dark thing is. then.
next to it, the
Where I see
creamery,
201.
it's these long buildings. They end up taking out a lot of Main Street.
So you're saying that, what does this mean?
That's
the
the
Ice-
building itself.
Okay,
It's
so
like
you're
a,
saying that this tax lot is like this?
yeah, so it
Okay.
takes out the whole
So here's
tax
the
lot.
property line right here.
Uh-huh,
You measure over 100 feet,
uh-huh,
you might hit maybe that one,
you do,
because this is a 60-foot right of way.
uh-huh.
So this is at an angle, because this is the rail line, so this is more than 60 feet. And let's say maybe this is 30 feet,
You just have to hit the edge. Your tax lot has to hit the edge of a tax lot with a house. It's not building to
I don't see
building.
it saying you hit
So
the edge of the
the
tax
problem
lot.
is little larger tax lots, it ends up taking out the effect of it amplifies a little bit. So like,
So there are a number of properties along here that are historically designated. That one isn't, that's something else.
this
That's
won't
the-
affect the historic designation.
Yeah, in here, one of these is.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So they're already limited by that.
isn't this an issue that needs to be discussed at the review of the comp plan instead of a adjustment of a zoning ordinance? I don't hear any answers.
I don't see a problem.
Other than us not being able to agree and we're.
Right, no,
bashing
no,
the
we're not
same-
agreeing, we're not disagreeing, we're just saying, we're not, what I'm hearing from Damon is that he doesn't understand what the problem is, and I'm not understanding what the problem is, so that there is a difference in the height in this section. Why is that a problem? Everything doesn't have to be absolutely the same. I think at this point, let's just set this aside for now, and let's move on to the next one, because we're not understanding each other, and I don't see where there's a problem.
The height by itself probably doesn't give you the whole picture, because isn't the contour of the land, let's take from the
Sure.
edge of the river and come back across 99A, and you're going up and down
Actually, it's
if
just
you're
a
just
big
going
drop.
east, but if you're going from
You're not hitting
way
any
up on
cliffs
one
along the
end of
bluff.
the downtown to the other end, that's a contour also. Are we just trying to protect everyone's view
No,
equitably?
there's no view issue. We're the ones bringing up, well, what
Well,
about,
I know, but.
what about the views?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Well, the equitable part of that is that why would we reduce the view for just this part of town when nobody else has that reduced?
Because
I think
these
that's what you're saying.
properties have the potential to redevelop, downtown is not gonna be redeveloping.
With additional heights.
Well,
Right.
You almost need to go to Lincoln City and see what there, but I
Go
got
to
a brother
Seaside.
down there.
Go to Seaside.
Yeah,
but-
or Seaside.
Well, that
And-
Main Street with those tall,
There's your
and-
canyon.
and
It's
what-
depressing.
What is their code? Do we,
no, we don't
No, I
wanna
don't
look at
know.
Seaside's code, that's for
So I
sure.
guess the other way to phrase the question is there sufficient incentive with this height limitation for the MUD zone to redevelop in the manner that is intended to be? And I don't know the answer to that.
Maybe that's their back patio and their open space, and then they develop beyond that to 75.
Yeah.
But you're talking about implementing the
Lots of creative ways
comprehensive
to
plan?
do stuff.
oh yeah, and you don't need a straight out from your property to the ocean or to the river. You may, if straight out is blocked by a 75-foot building there, but you get a view off to an angle. May
Yes.
not be the view you really want to see. That's why I'm trying to relate it to.
Well, Seaside is a
the
classic
Seaside
example. I
or
remember
Lincoln City.
Before they built that big hotel there right at the end of the
yeah.
prom, you could come down that street and you had sort of a little vista of the, which is what Seaside's famous for, and now you
Little
got,
cottages and stuff
you
like
got
that.
nothing. You got this really butt ugly building there.
Okay.
Just,
There's some people probably don't care about all of that.
The visitors.
Because it brings business to the city.
Yeah.
The lodging
Is it worth it?
that comes, is it worth it? I don't know,
I
but.
think they lost some of their town.
so I would say, put a star on this one and.
We'll come back.
I've
Yeah.
got those all
And
noted.
you know, frankly,
Okay.
at some point, I
The
wouldn't
concerns for
mind
sure.
walking around in this area with one of you, just
I just did the other day.
just to kind of see
Because I was
what,
looking at this.
what you're looking at. My offhand gut thought is to not let it be any higher than the Masonic building. I mean, we've got kind of a, this is the height that it is along 99, you know? I mean, and so to go, ooh,
Yeah.
just seems a bit much, but, so my.
Particularly if you want to tie, if people want to continue to, again, it's just
Yeah.
me personally, I don't consider this part of downtown.
But if we're going to develop the, you know, with the hotel and the garbage dump and Willamette Falls, then at some point this will become a continuation of downtown. And so we need to have the ability to have a coherent vision of that. And I think
Some consistency.
letting, you know, going to 75, we may need to just change that down to 60 or whatever the Masonic building is, just 60 for a round number.
Damon, look what it's gonna do if you go from 45 to 75. Look what it's gonna do to those property values there.
I think
I mean-
60 is a great compromise.
Well, yeah, my point being, if you take a whole red or blue area there and apply 75 feet there, you are in essence creating a new downtown,
It's the modern downtown
the
rather than
modern
historic
downtown.
downtown.
And the question is, Is that a zoning issue or is that a planning issue?
It's a public policy
I think
issue.
it
That's
has-
right, and public policy should be discussed as public policy
Yeah.
by the public, and that requires a review of the
Public.
comp plan. That requires the public, not just us.
Right, well, we
Is
don't
it-
have any public.
So anyway, mark this one, let's go on, because I'm
All right,
dying.
let's talk about food carts.
Food carts, huh?
Okay, I got lots of issues with this.
Okay, let's start with them and then we can get into our issues.
Code
Okay.
packet page 265, the
Are you
proposal.
going in an alphabetical order in some way? Because we're sure skipping around a lot in here.
No, because these are the little issues, so they're spread throughout the code, so this,
I wish I could say yes, but no.
These are little issues?
no, there are discrete issues that are
No.
in different chapters. It's not one through one like the earlier part, the
Okay.
first couple hearings where we.
I was just trying to figure
through.
out if there was a method to the madness because I'm thinking, okay, we're skipping around.
We tried to group issues together on one slide. You'll see.
Oh, thank you
That's
for
the
putting
method.
down that they can't sell pot in the food carts. I know somebody will try.
The
Oh
mobile
my
vendor
God.
prohibition for
I've got
marijuana
a
is
down payment on
already
one
in
right
the
now.
code. That's already in there,
Bob,
so.
I'm sorry, we just burst your
Yeah.
business bubble.
I don't think OLCC
My
allows it
clock was
anyway.
better.
Oh, no, I don't think they do
Okay,
either.
let's go.
But see, at least we're laughing about it.
Anyway, so that's an easy
Go
one.
ahead, guys, take off. Floor is yours.
So besides the marijuana vending, the other part of this is to propose, public works requirements notwithstanding, the zoning part of this would be allowing mobile food carts on the Willamette Falls Blue Heron site. And in the mixed use and downtown zones,
So
go ahead.
the problem we're trying to solve is that
Mhm.
Willamette Falls downtown district or the legacy site allows food carts. We have no standards for food carts.
right.
And
So
we mentioned
this is
that
just
many
for
times.
that, this is not citywide, this is just for that property and it's just for the private property. It's not in the right of way.
And it has to have a special event permit?
Why would we
No.
want to have
No,
10
not
food
in-
that would be
carts at
right.
any one time? Good Lord.
You would have
Odds show it.
options. You could have a permanent food cart and go through, a type 2 site plan design review. You could have a temporary one where you're there for 5 hours within a 24-hour period. 5 hours apparently is the industry standard for food carts to set up for lunch or whatever. And if you do that temporary one, you have fewer design standards.
What about if somebody wants to have like a mobile food truck?
Like you have a
This is
picture.
not in the right of way. This is for only on private side. So you could have the truck. It would still have to adhere to these design standards. So the design standards take out a lot of the, like building orientation, those kind of things, transparency don't work well as applied to food carts. And so that's where the code was explicit in exempting which standards ought not to apply. But if they're there for more than 5 hours within a 24-hour period, though, they still have to hook up to utilities. They'll have to meet that they'll have to meet that standard. So there are things that they'll have to do.
So would that mean including the design standards that are going to be available for the Willamette Falls downtown district?
The design standards are in the code.
Right, so I mean, what I'm getting at is that what I personally do not want to see is this complete mishmash of really nice food carts and then one that looked like somebody just dragged it out of the dump and then they cleaned it up a little bit and put a food cart thing in it. There is a food court pod in Happy Valley that I have not personally been to, but I've been driving by it a lot, and this happened to be last 2 times I was stopped right there so I could kind of look over. And they're all about the same size. They're all really nice and clean. I mean, obviously whoever owns it said you can't have anything trashy or junky or something
And
because
they're buildings that have fire restrictions and codes and all
they're
of
not
that.
all
They're
right next to each other. They're kind of in a little grouping.
So it's a cluster then.
They're a cluster, they're there, I mean, they could be moved, but they're all hooked up to utilities. I mean, it
I
actually
don't
looks
think
pretty,
they are hooked up to utilities, though.
there's a couple of them that I saw some hookups,
Yeah, I mean, I think just for power, but.
yeah.
With this standard, they'd have to be hooked up to sewer and water if they were not there for the 25-hour period. If they were there, then they would have to be there.
So somebody would have to design something that would make it easy for them, because how are they gonna hook up, if they're on a parking stall, how do you do that?
The one in Beaverton does hook up to utilities
Well, no, I
right
mean,
across
how would
from their
they,
city
how would
hall.
somebody do that?
Yeah, there's a food cart.
It would be designed to be hooked up, because you can't just go digging in a parking stall and go, boom, here's a connection.
Yeah, yeah.
Or it just hit water.
So anyway, these are just some standards that only apply to that. What kind of comment, what kind of feedback do you
But
guys
but
have?
in Willamette
What I'm
Falls,
hearing though,
So what about the rest of the place where
is
people have been
the-
requesting?
something that requires that it not be
Not requested
trashy
outs-
nor junky.
outside of the Willamette
Well,
Falls,
we're-
is,
Yeah, and just to be clear, there are no, cannot be trashy or, there are no maintenance, there's no standard on minimum design other than what we
What's in the
normally
code
have.
for the Willamette Falls downtown district?
Yeah.
So let's say,
Are
you know, I'm
both
the
of
owner of
these
Oregon City Brewing and I
legal in
decide I wanna bring a
Willamette
food
Falls?
cart in.
and they're
That's
not
still
legal
verboten.
outside of,
Yeah, we have heard from the planning commission lots of food cart discussions over the past year. To me, that citywide discussion
Right, that
needs a
doesn't-
lot more attention than this can handle.
So
Or
how are
what-
the ones allowed that they have the, kind of the food, are they booths or are there carts up at the farmer's market?
Special event permit. right?
Yeah, you can do almost special
Special
event
events.
permits.
Okay.
What are other cities doing?
Allowing them.
Conditional.
I think a lot of them are allowing food cart, or moving towards allowing food carts. Some aren't though, it depends.
No, I noticed
We should
these
just
are
be
all on
whatever,
wheels.
whatever you guys want, I mean, whatever we as a city.
Yeah, I mean,
These are all on wheels here,
Yeah.
which,
right.
using public right of way.
Yep, which we're not proposing to do.
You what?
We're not
not.
proposing,
Not proposing to allow that in the public right of way. It would be on a lot or on a private site.
but can they drive down the street to
Or in a
get to
parking
their
lot.
Yeah.
spot for 5 hours out of 24?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
This one that shows in the picture, there was, I don't think she's doing it anymore, but this woman had a food cart, a food truck. She would be, on Mondays and Wednesdays, she'd be in front of the 1900 building. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, she'd be down at Albert's Mill, and she had a permit to be, because there was a little pullout at the 1900 building that was not part of the public right of way, and at Albert's, there was a little, kind of a little turnaround before you came back out to the street, so she was parked there, and it looked very much like this one, except that wasn't the name, but I mean, that's about what it looked like. It was a very nice facility.
What's the difference between these, the public approach to these, and those carts trucks? I mean, they're
I
big
mean,
trucks.
they come to industrial
Yeah,
sites,
yeah.
that's a food truck.
And they,
Yeah, it's a
rub-
food truck.
and my golly, some of them are,
There's a taco truck that comes to,
there's gourmet.
yeah, comes down to, near Miles Molded Fiberglass.
So how are those regulated?
Same. The definition, so a cart and a truck are different. They're the same, right, under the definition? Okay. Yeah, so
All right,
food
ready?
cart includes food truck.
All right, first off, I think when I look at these, I think immediately of industrial and campus industrial, that guy who swoops in, he's there for 20 minutes, and then he goes to the next spot, 3 blocks down, and
He's usually there for an hour for lunch.
well, not the, I'm down on Swan Island. If that isn't industrial, I don't know what the definition is.
It is.
And there's 2 trucks that come through there. One comes by in the morning and does breakfast burritos, and one comes by in the afternoon and does lunch
And he's
stuff.
only there for 20 minutes?
He's only there for 20 minutes in front of each site.
Oh, okay.
And he drives like 4 blocks down or a little further down the road, and then he stops, and he's parking on the side of the street and opening up and doing his thing, and then he's gone. And my experience from Los Angeles and San Diego and, is this is a significant, useful business.
You bet. It's big business.
We call them roach coaches in LA, but, and I think there are certain zones where if the guy gets a business permit, that he should be allowed to, do, a dash and dine.
So you mean like going up to Red Soils Industrial Park?
Yeah, go up and
And
pull
drive
up and next to
front of
Benchmade.
Benchmade, yeah.
But not to say in Benchmade's parking lot, but, you know, right there, so that the people can come out of the recorder's
Well, you
office and
have to be
across
at
the
Bench
street.
Mays parking lot because you can't be, there's no parking on Beaver Creek Road, so you have to go
But
into.
there, well, but it doesn't have to be in Benchmades, you can be on that side road.
Right. The
But
frontage.
anyway, and so I think that we need to have, and allow those standards to occur. I mean, you've got good standards here, you know, for Wild Falls or whatever. But, you know, I would say, short of actually a pod, most mobile food carts are mobile food carts. And if they're there for more than an hour, you know, then I would be surprised. Portland's a different world because they started doing these pods, and for a while they were flash pods. And it was like, you know, on Tuesday, everybody's gonna show up and we're gonna get out of here before the cops come and roust us, or they'll roust us, but we'll give them a taco, and then by the time they're finished writing the tickets, we're all gone. You know, I mean, and so I know we want to avoid that.
Is that in their business plan?
I think it was, because I saw a lot of that downtown before they, especially around Pioneer. And so I don't think we want to prohibit them. In fact, what my little notes for the different districts is, you know, that they should be allowed in some districts without even a special permit. They just need a business license.
Well, that's a good point,
but-
Damon. That's a good point.
Let me finish.
The other thing though is, in all of our different districts, you say mobile vendors, mobile vendors, mobile vendors. That means I can drive up with my flag truck, open it up, and start selling all sorts of flags and rugs.
It's mobile food.
No, you say mobile vendor in all your zones. Even in this, the very last paragraph, you talk about mobile vendors again.
I really want the flags and the
So-
and the Elvis rugs.
So we need to be very consistent and up to the point of saying
mobile
mobile vendors
vendors.
other than food carts are not prohibited. So, because if you just say a mobile vendor, then as long as I'm not selling marijuana, but I'm in my truck and I drop the tailgate and I want to start selling, I can do it.
Is that where you're gonna do your salmon?
No, because I don't want to cross the Indians,
Okay,
Native Americans, sorry.
yes, Native Americans. Okay, you can do
So-
your beef jerky out of that.
Yeah.
I'll check for,
Denise?
Do we have a definition for a mobile vendor?
No, and I don't
Well,
care.
that's a good point.
no,
You raise a good point on the, why are we doing this through the zoning ordinance as opposed to the business license concept?
Well, they have to get a business license because they're doing business in Oregon City.
That's right, but my point is, can it all be regulated through the business license process?
Nope.
Why?
They don't come out all the time and get them unless they get nipped.
Well, then nip them, let me see your
So-
business license.
Yeah, so,
Haven't answered my question yet.
well, that's not a land use process, that's just.
Well, why is this a land use process? they're there
Because
for-
we're amending the zoning code.
Well, why are we doing it in the zoning code? Why is it a land use?
Because we're talking
because
about,
potentially they'd have to hook up to utilities if they're
Well,
there
let
for
me
any
ask it
length of
another
time.
way. Do we want it to be in the zoning ordinance? Is there
We
another
do.
way that we
I
can
think
regulate?
because there's some of them that should, like industrial, campus industrial, or institutional campus industrial. There's like, I don't remember whichever, I marked in each one where I think, there's certain zones where I think it's appropriate for a guy to drive up and open up his roach coach and do his thing. And there's some zones that aren't. I mean, another example of that you hear every summer is the ice cream man. And he's driving all the way through all the residential areas with this little thing going boo-doo-doo-doo-doo.
Yeah, but he's using a public right of way.
But it's still an illegal use.
It's a mobile,
I mean, he can drive from point A to point B, but as soon as he stops and starts selling, he's violated the law.
yeah. I think the one Hal's that drives through Oregon City, I think they have a business license. I'm
Again,
not sure
yeah.
how, but,
Yeah, so,
sorry, that was a bad pun.
but, so I think we should allow the fast movers to exist.
The upscale ones, like this truck that's showing.
Well,
Yes,
if
that's very nice.
they're
That
not,
one-
if they're not upscale, people aren't gonna buy their stuff and they're gonna move on.
They can pull into a campus, whether it's a Clackamas Community
Yeah,
College.
I'm surprised they don't have any
or
mobile food
high
carts at the college.
school, or wherever there's several hundred people in an hour's period of time or less, they want to get out of their building, get their food, eat it, and get back to work.
Yeah, and employers love it because that means they don't have to have a full-on cafeteria. They just
Yeah.
need a bunch of benches.
So I want to summarize what I think I hear you saying, and that is that we should come back with some standards for mobile food carts, make sure our wording of whatever it is that we're calling them is consistent in our code. And when we do come back, we should come back with it expanded into other zoning designations, things where there is employment, is what I heard, is
Yeah,
what I'm
employment,
hearing.
definitely not residential.
No, certainly not residential. We'll take a look at some of the zoning designations. And then it should be allowed for, we have a standard that allows them for 5 hours within a 24-hour period. It sounds like,
That might be a
That's
little
too
long.
long?
That might be, because are they gonna serve breakfast,
Some of
burritos?
them we-
in the
it's
parking
the
lot?
ones
not
that
telling
do,
them what they
if they
can
do
serve.
prep on site, that's where this industry
Sure.
standard is like,
But
Yeah.
are they gonna serve for 2 consecutive meals? Or if they're gonna
A lot of
serve
them
just
do.
one
A
meal
lot
at
of them do.
lunchtime?
Yeah, so, I mean,
They're doing prep when they get there. That's why the 5
Well,
hours. It's not ready to go when.
I agree,
yeah.
I would give that allowance of
Yeah.
something, I don't know,
Yeah,
nothing magic
you know,
about the
you-
5
Five
hour
is the
number, but.
industry
you say
standard.
5 or less, and that takes care of, the dasher who's just, hitting 26 sites and off he goes to, Happy Valley or whatever, and that's fine. And if they're there for longer than 5, I agree that they need to, hook up to services. My only concern is, and this is just from experience, is if they're there for longer than 5 hours and they hook up to a utility, they might be dumping their grease traps in those, into the sewers.
Yeah,
And so,
lots of stuff.
yeah, there'd be a full-on building, and they'd have to comply with all the
not
same.
necessarily, not what you're saying. I mean, if they do the Beaverton model where they pull into a parking lot into the special area, or, if they just do pods like Portlandias are all over the place, they're not buildings, they're still mobile, they still got their tires. They may be a trailer rather than a truck, but,
Trailer usually indicates.
Our
that
building
the
department would take a look at it. If I were to guess, I would say the one in Beaverton probably has a grease trap that it all drains, all the carts, like
Yeah,
an
I-
RV hookup and it all goes there.
know,
yeah, I understand. I'm just saying that that's
But-
something we want to be cognizant of if you're getting together with Public Works for them to design whatever their standards are for
Yeah.
it to be a pod site, that there's good, clear,
Then they'll have to go through site plan design review for a pod site, so then we'll get that opportunity.
we charge a franchise fee to a taxi company to use our public streets, do we not?
Yes.
Why would it be inappropriate to do the same for one of these?
yeah,
They
potentially.
gotta use public streets to get to where they're going.
Yeah,
How do you, and like Damon said, some of them don't get business permits or business licenses. How do you enforce that?
This code requires a type 1 site plan design review, and then they also require a business license, so we can track which ones do have them or not. Should we?
I know that we
Catch them.
require them, but what if a guy refuses to make application? He's in and out.
yeah, but we got enough police officers and we're small enough that,
We'll deal with code enforcement. I mean, we just want to make sure we get the standard right at
yeah.
this point.
And, I'm good with what you have for standards. I just think we need to expand the applicability.
What zones are you thinking should be allowed in?
Oh, I don't, campus industrial,
Zones,
right,
institutional.
We'll give you a
General
list.
industrial.
So I just want to know what his opinion was.
GI, general
And there's a
industrial.
mixed-use employment zone as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. I wrote it down in each one of the zones and I'm gonna get together with you guys
What
tomorrow.
about parks?
Example could be.
No, that would be a special
Red
permit.
Soils?
That'd be special.
Yeah,
use.
Red Soils campus up
yeah.
there,
That's campus
That-
industrial,
I think
so
that'd
that
be
would.
MUE. MUE.
MU.
Yeah.
community college.
Employment.
Okay, well, if that's what that is, then it should be MUE,
Okay.
so.
All right, next one.
Okay, next one is, due to the need and pressure on parking lots, right now, you can not have a parking lot as an exclusive primary use.
you
It has
can't-
to be associated with a business in downtown in
So
order
you
to,
can't do like down in Portland where guys
We
just
have
got the
several
space.
pre-existing non-conforming
You might have
in
some
downtown.
pre-existing
Yeah,
ones,
'cause
right.
they've been parking lots since Moses was a pup.
so this would make things a lot more flexible and allow people to use overnight their parking lot for parking downtown. When not needed for use by the principal use. So that would be,
So somebody couldn't build a parking lot, put a shack on it and say it's a used car lot and he just doesn't have any inventory currently.
and we'd probably cash that through site plan and design review, because it would have to apply to that,
But that's the idea, is we don't want that to
yeah,
happen.
we don't want that, no.
We want the people who have a business,
Mm-hmm.
that they're done at 5 and the restaurants still need people to park till 10, have a place to park.
And someone
One on Main
could,
Street that does not have a business associated with it because they tore the building down and built a parking lot.
Yeah,
right,
Back when you were a child,
yes.
Yeah, we just
My
want to
dad
use
used to work there.
land
not since
more
I moved here,
efficiently.
but it was already a parking lot. Okay, so
So
that
what
is
are,
on
what are we
195.
considering here after?
So-
Whose
So for
parking lots are we
instance,
gonna use?
This parking
well, it
lot
would.
downtown, you know, between,
Oh, I
So-
don't mean a specific, but if,
well, no, let's use a specific, because so we've said for years, why can't downtown businesses use that parking lot after hours to park some of these people who are complaining that they can't go downtown because there's nowhere to park?
Right.
So this would allow for that parking lot to be utilized in the evening when it's not being utilized for regular off-street parking, correct?
Yes.
and are these publicly owned
No,
parking
these are
lots?
private
These
lots.
are
These are
private
private. These are
businesses?
private.
Yeah.
So if,
Either way.
Either.
I mean,
Yeah, city would be subject to doing. the
city
same
is,
sort.
I've heard that the city was thinking of doing this, and but city parking lots can be used after city business hours.
Yeah, we did have a request for City Hall. So if City Hall was closed or something, we would
But
be able
if you
to.
take a.
I don't know, because the night meetings was.
Yeah, a lot of people do use this lot on the weekends. For instance, we had the
Sure.
antique fair.
Say we were a business,
Right, we're a business.
And the
We're
dental
McLean
office is
We're the
closed.
McLean Clinic, and we're closed on the
Yeah.
weekends. And let's say the antique fair says, hey, can we use your parking lot after hours on the weekend for our antique fair? Be a perfect example.
And it doesn't what am I trying to say? It doesn't preclude the use for its principal use in the mixed
Right.
use zone. You know,
But
it's
they're
not
not
gonna,
open.
it's not gonna push those out
No,
because
because
it's
they're not
after
open,
hours.
but it doesn't preclude anybody from charging an arm and a leg to say, hey, you can use my
That's
parking
right.
lot.
Or the businesses that put parking for customers only, subject to towing.
Oh, boy.
You.
They would put another sign that
What do
says
you get
except
to
on,
get approval from those
Between the
except on
hours.
people?
weekends, yeah.
What do you do to say if they've got their sign out there subject to towing? Do you get an agreement with each individual
It's not the
business to
city
use
doing,
it?
it's not the city doing this. This is between private parties.
Yeah, we're just saying,
We're allowing
we're
it.
just saying it's okay.
The code, we're allowing it, but we don't get anybody's permission to do it?
No, we're not, the city,
we'll just-
as a city, we're not saying we want to use people's parking lots. Let's say I own
Well, just real quick,
a restaurant downtown and I want to use that I want to contract with that property owner on Main Street to use his parking. His sign would then say, you see this all over downtown,
Oh, yeah.
parking for blah, 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 restaurant after hours only.
You said the key word, contract
Yes,
with them.
exactly. This would allow me to contract with that property owner to use his
right.
parking lot
Okay.
for my
There
restaurant after hours.
you changed the
Because-
picture for me.
yeah, because currently,
That's
say for
what's allowed.
instance,
Yeah.
the furniture store,
Right, Bushes.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, so Bush's has a parking lot, and they've got 25 spaces. Currently, they couldn't say, Mia Familia, you can use this after hours,
Exactly.
because that's not the principal use of the parking lot,
Right.
it's a furniture store. Now, it doesn't mean, what it means is, they could just not have any tow signs and people would just park there after hours
We'd say parking for
this way,
familia only.
but this way you're incentivizing people to utilize their parking lots to take down those or will be towed signs.
Well, they
And-
wouldn't take them down, they would
Well,
add to them.
but I mean, right now, nobody parks there because they're afraid of getting towed.
Well, they
even-
have been.
Yeah, but that's what the idea is, to incentivize those empty spaces to be filled, whether it's through a paid thing or a ticketing system or whatever. But, they don't have to say, oh, I'm only a
It's
furniture store,
It
too
allows
bad.
for a private transaction to occur
Legally.
where parking is.
And the one that's close to home here is the county museum and the Still House.
Horrible parking. Yeah, they share.
They share parking lot, and it's, and.
Technically, they
And the
can.
museum
They can't.
does hold some reserve that if they have a thing going there, you can't.
You can't still house, people can't use it.
So it's not a contract with the city at all, it's
No, it's
contracts
private.
with your neighbors to share parking.
Right.
It does require approval by the city, but,
Yeah.
all right, next one.
Okay, so that's.
Okay?
Transitional shelter, so the term transitional shelter, we're working on definition for your review. Currently, this is not a use that's defined in the code. The proposal would be, and I think we've already discussed this to some extent, conditional use in residential zones for less than 10 beds, be a permitted use in the mixed-use zones, and prohibited in all other zoning designations.
And this is a topic that I have already indicated needs to have a public discussion and should not be part of what we're doing right now. Because I don't support allowing a use to be now suddenly come into the code and have no review and no requirements for it whatsoever, just all of a sudden, boom, be in there.
Well, yeah.
It's like food carts. If you think food carts need to have a broader community discussion, this sure as heck does.
Yeah, we
Is there anything else you feel strongly about?
Oh, I feel very strongly
did
about
introduce
this.
this, not at the very beginning of the project advisory team meetings, but about halfway through.
And I said the same thing
You know, I
all
think,
the way through it.
I think
It's-
Denise has got a good point.
It
Probably
needs
do.
to be discussed.
I've always said that one of your most fragile zones in any city is your residential zones. And we've got to pay particularly attention to those zones to retain their character. And this would be a deal buster here if you
But it's a
didn't have.
conditional use process. So,
Well,
you can
Which
stipulate.
has changed, and we appreciate that.
Pardon?
That's changed, and we appreciate that. It was a
Yeah,
permitted
right,
use,
right.
so.
Not in residential.
No,
It was
not
just
residential.
permitted in MUC and MUD.
It's either gonna be conditional everywhere that you have down here, or, I'm looking for it on page 71, because I obviously haven't
Okay.
gotten to this.
Yeah, so
I'm on
here's
page 71.
here's the problem that we're trying to
120.
solve, is that we need to define it somewhere in the code, whether it's permitted, conditional, prohibited, that's up to the community to figure out. But what would be
Is that
helpful is to
120?
have it so that people know.
Denise,
As you
See the
know,
red
we've been doing emergency
that's all it is
ordinances
for the
last
first
couple of
sheet.
years
The
to
definition is on 120.
exempt planning, which is not a good solution.
No.
So that's where
saying,
some of the
I'm going
basis
there.
of this
It's
came
like
off
page
of,
number.
is that a lot of, a
That's
couple
a
of those
transitional housing,
housings were in
They was trying to say
MUD and
120, I
MUC.
think it's too-
excluding transitional housing.
And so as Pete was talked about, this went through our advisory committee. We had
Did
a
not take a position on
charrette
it.
thing, a work session on it, which most of the work session ended up being about homelessness, as opposed to some other housing types. And then a couple of meetings, but they did not come up with a consensus on this issue. They just talked about it.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's where this came from and why we have it. So whatever the community or commissions decide, I think from staff's perspective, I just want to have it somewhere, wherever that is. Not even permitted or prohibited, just listed so we know either it can or
You're
can't or
acknowledging that
not.
it exists.
Yeah, that's what I mean by
Yeah.
somewhere.
And most of your uses, I don't have a real problem with, I have no problem with it being a conditional use in all the zones you mentioned. My big problem is, the amount of beds, especially in a residential zone. Because I think the number of beds needs to be tied to like the sanitary facilities. You know, because I've got 800 square feet in my basement. I have one bathroom on my first floor, but I could put 5 bunk beds in there real easy. And so, you know, and that isn't good for them because then they gotta line up and they basically spend all day going through their 3 S's, and then they get back in line when they're done and go back through, because it's time for their afternoon 3 S's. And if you don't know what that is, that's,
We know what it
Well,
is.
so we can, you can change it to say like X number per square feet. There's also the building code that looks at this in the fire code, so they're much a part of this process and they have certain amount. They have a number per square footage that they allow to be in a specific space, so there's that part too.
well, and the other concern I have about any of these is, you know, prisons say it's a bunk bed. You know, it's 2 people in a cell. So to squeeze these people in any tighter than that is, I think, right off the bat says that we're not doing them a service. So, you know, whatever that breakdown is of the building, you know, occupancy versus volume, you know, it needs to be, you know, you take out the living room and put 4 bunk beds in because you've got, you know, or 6 bunk beds in, because that gives you the square footage. You know, you might, we're okay with that, it's a barracks and we're used to that. But, you know, if prisons are twofers, you know, then, you know, I don't know what we want to do, but I'm really concerned about,
Yeah, there are some specific provisions in the conditional use chapter with respect to certain types of conditional uses like assisted living facilities and others. So potentially you could add.
And what
a
page is
cri-
that?
Well, that's not in the packet.
Oh,
So that would be something we'd come back to you.
yeah, I mean, when we talked about this briefly earlier, you said, well, it's just a residential care facility. There's a difference
Right,
in a residential care facility and transitional facility, and that is the state's involved. And
yeah,
the state may not be involved in a transitional shelter.
no,
So-
you're
Should be.
probably right there.
Can you give a little bit of a definition of transitional
Sorry, it's on
shelters?
page 120 right now. The current
Who's the
proposed
owner of
definition-
that? Who's going to offer this service? Is it churches or is
It
it,
could be an
Anybody.
existing
It could be
church.
you.
it could be any, it could be individuals,
nonprofit,
right?
Could be
Could be
you.
an individual,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and just real quick under the definition, you say transitional shelters are not considered bed and breakfast, inns, boarding houses, hotels, or motels. You need to add that in there. And then you just say on a short-term basis, so I think we need to define short-term basis.
In case of emergency, all the rules are gonna be out the window.
Yeah, this doesn't refer to heating and cooling shelters, so
yeah, it
that's,
does. It says including warming shelters and other similar
Yeah.
shelters. I'm not sure what is similar to a warming,
a cooling shelter.
a cooling
Cooling
shelter,
center.
okay.
6 months difference.
And the other thing is, I was told that if we call it just a shelter as opposed to a transitional shelter, apparently that puts it more in line with HUD funding or something like that, makes it easier to potentially fund them.
Yeah,
So there is a question if we could change it from transitional shelter to shelter.
If you're going to allow it in
Just
the
in title.
MUC1 zone and MUC zone and MUD zone, you all know which one I'm talking about. It's zoned MUC1, completely surrounded by residential. I don't know where some of the MUC2 zones are, but maybe people who own businesses would be concerned. What about MUD? That's mixed use.
Yeah.
What's the D again?
Downtown?
Downtown?
Again, if they're permitted outright without going through any
Yeah.
review,
I think right off the bat, I think we all
It's-
agree it has to be conditional use, so there's some form of control. If they, you know, that first off, we know where they are. And secondly, that, you know, if they're not meeting the
They don't
needs
get
of their
passed.
surrounding territory, that, you know, we can pull their permit.
I don't think anything should get a pass.
Right.
It should have been reviewed from day one, and I'm not gonna, you know, all know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It just was not represented as what it was going to be, and people, again, I'm objecting to it for the very reason that this has not been discussed by our community. I don't feel comfortable making a decision on behalf of our entire community about food trucks and about this. I mean, I have some feelings about food trucks, but again, if you feel that that's a community discussion, this is definitely a community
Well, and
discussion.
I will say that at least food trucks have had a couple of public hearings because,
We had a person come in and petition us saying they wanted to be
there
allowed.
was another element of that too. So there, at least that's had some voicing, but, you know, I do agree that for moving this forward, I think we just, right off the bat, make them all conditional uses. And then we probably need to have, whether it's the city commission or us or whoever, have at the very least a public workshop about it so that people can come in and say yay or nay. We hear about
We've been hearing about Roosevelt Street
Right.
for,
you know, and. you
As
know,
a
and
part
just-
of this process, you want to put a
No,
workshop?
no, I think it needs to
Separate.
be,
It's a separate-
its own thing.
Okay.
That may inform this process, that may cause an
Okay.
adjustment, but,
It probably won't happen with this, but you're
Right.
saying a follow-up.
they
Okay.
have value, and there is a reason that they need to exist.
Right.
I'm not opposed to them. I'm just opposed to anybody or anything getting an automatic pass for something that has not been discussed by this community.
right,
And I just really think that we are doing a disservice to the public if we don't, we can keep it, people start getting emotional, they have to get out of the room. This
Yeah.
is, I'm looking at it as a logical process.
Yeah.
What is the need in our community? Where do, you know, are there places that are more appropriate than others? I mean, we got Paul over here talking about, oh, let's put little tiny tough sheds on parking lots and church parking lots. I don't know if that's the solution. It
but
needs-
it's not possible now, and that's why I think,
Well, that's not gonna happen, but
Yeah.
it requires a further community discussion about, you know, let's use Portland as the bad people and not do what they're doing,
right,
because that's not working.
yeah.
Well, one thing, they don't know what they're doing.
Well, I'm gonna let you say that, I'm not gonna say that.
So, to move this forward, I think make them all conditional uses. We'll look a little closer at the definition and then, maybe schedule something out there for October or whatever for a,
And criteria for approval of the conditional uses.
yeah,
Because none of us here are going to deny a situation where it's an emergency.
right,
Say the governor declares a statewide emergency
Well, but-
because of an earthquake or something like that. You know, we're not going to deny somebody using our garage because their house just got
Well-
eaten up by a sinkhole. you
Well,
know.
what happens is that in communities, they allow schools and places like that to be a Red
Schools,
Cross holding facility. That's
Yeah.
that's a natural, that is not that.
yeah.
All right, we hear
Okay,
you.
gotcha.
But it could be though.
Loud and
Yeah.
clear.
It could possibly be, because I remember when the city of Portland wanted to allow FEMA to use Washington Monroe High School as a temporary shelter for people who were displaced by Hurricane Katrina. And we all said as staff, is that really appropriate to bus people halfway across the country and put them in a building that you don't feel is safe to be a school?
Yeah.
I mean, it was very
We had the
crazy.
same thing
What
here.
did they do in Vanport when those people had to evacuate?
They bunked them in, they went to friends, and there was no place for them to go.
This
They-
is what I'm talking about.
They went with friends and
This-
relatives and
This is what
whatever.
I'm talking about. Somebody said, you can't do that. You know?
All right,
Historic Review Board.
Good job.
do you mind if we keep, okay.
This is a simple one.
It's never simple.
Well, as a quasi-judicial decision-making body, the Historic Review Board has to follow the administration procedures sections for appeals. It's always been that way. This just recognizes that process.
And what page
takes
is that on?
Looking for it now.
The well, actually, it's the very first chapter, 2.56, I believe, is appeals. HRB, sorry. And then removing that section in the HRB chapter and
Oh, 1740.
referring to 1750 instead.
Is it in our binder?
And already
Page
in
234,
230, thanks, Dave.
1750, 190, 80.
And thank you so much for having page numbers.
Yeah.
I wish I could say that was me, that was Laura.
No, it was you, Pete. It's all you. Because have you ever been someplace where somebody's going through something and there are no
I
page
can't even
numbers
remember
on?
if
It's
it
just
was me
like-
or not.
It's like,
Okay. and then
34
Fees are on the
appeals.
fee schedule, so that's where they ought to reside, not in the development
Oh,
code.
this one didn't get colored.
Oh, I'm sorry, 236.
Because it's not, there's some places where stuff is marked out but not in
Yeah,
red.
236F.
236 F. I'm on 236 F. Okay, hearing appeal?
Yeah, it says appeal hearing shall be conducted by the City Commission, Planning Commission, and Historic Review Board.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry
Oh,
there.
those should be capitalized, actually.
I know, I've already spoken to them about their capitalization.
Next round of code changes.
No, before this one is complete.
So that's pretty straightforward.
So you need to strike Planning Commission and Historic Review Board.
so actually though,
Oops, sorry. There was a code section that wasn't included in your packet.
Oh, no.
I know.
Which one was that?
I'm shocked.
2.5? Oh, that is missing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's missing from here.
One,
Sorry.
There are simple red lines that we'll make sure are included in the next round, but it is
It's the red line section of the Historic Review Board,
of Title
of
II.
Title II, which talks about the makeup of the HRB and the.
Well, you can add that to page 238. 328, add that at the back.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
problem we were trying to solve is that Historic Review Board in Title II talks about appeals process, and it's slightly different than the appeals process in 1750, so we
Yeah, well, the
cross-referenced.
appeals process for HRB has always been a little bit different than it is for everything else, since I can remember.
We just want to make sure that we have one code that's right and not two codes that
What's
are
the
slightly
change?
different. The appeals process for Historic Review Board is we're not changing the appeals process, we're clarifying what the code says. So Historic Review Board decisions are still appealable to the City Commission on the same timeline with the same process. We just want to make sure we're very clear, because in no other case do we have the appeals process in Title II, which is where it talks about the board. We have them in Title 17.
well, and you're
Oh,
also
there was a
clearing up
resolution.
that Historic Review Board decisions could be, I don't remember the term, but they basically could appeal to themselves, be reheard, what was that?
Are you talking about-
Reconsidered.
That's a different part, we'll talk about that in a
That's a different
second.
thing.
Yeah.
But
So
it's-
what does it say in Title II, or are you gonna give that to us later, so we're skipping this for now until we can see it?
Yeah. we can
Yeah,
skip this-
it basically
that
just
and bring it
says
back.
appeals, and it removes all the language, and it says refer to 1750.
What's wrong with appeals directly to the court system as opposed to the political system?
You have to exhaust your administrative
Yeah,
remedies.
the courts will
Remedies.
throw it
They'll
back.
throw you back.
The what?
You can
Oh,
do
oh,
that. I
you
mean, there are
can.
some places like where, so it's a larger city commission policy discussion. They have been having discussions about, or they had a work session talking about a potential for a hearings officer to hear some appeals of type 2 decisions rather than them. It's what they were zeroing in on, but decided not to do that.
Why would they hear a type 2 and not us?
You don't hear
No,
type 2s, they
appeals.
hear type 2 because they're the final city decision. They're the final policy makers with the final say for the city. So they hear all the appeals. And so with that, we polled to see what everybody else does for appeals. And there are certainly some jurisdictions where if they have a hearings officer, that's the final city decision maker. So they would have a hearings officer in place of a type 3 and that's it. And then it goes straight to courts from there. But there are no changes, was the settlement of that work session.
It's not paying for high-priced attorneys, we could probably afford that.
You know, the irony of this whole thing is that we get caught up in our resources, time being one of them, is invested so much in review of the process as opposed to actual planning. It's becoming more and more of a legal process as opposed to a land use planning process.
Because people feel like that's the only remedy that they have,
When it's getting more and
unfortunately.
more.
Oh, it's litigious, yes, I understand.
Politicized, even at the state level.
So, public and street trees chapter, we're proposing that some of the language on the applicability section be clarified so that currently it applies to new construction and major redevelopment, but we would just use the term development because that term is already defined in the city code. The spacing requirements for street trees currently applies to streetlights, hydrants, and intersections. I think we heard from you guys that the power line clearance requirement was a little ambiguous because it refers to mature height. So that would be rephrased.
And just to be clear, the difference between 5 feet from all public utilities,
Yeah, what
that
kind of
is,
public
that
utilities?
is the planting of the tree,
Yeah.
not the branches. So I could plant a tree and it could potentially branch into that pole.
Eventually it could, yeah.
Okay, and then, so if I'm doing my every 30 feet,
Right.
but at one of my 30 feet, I'm within 5 feet, does that mean I can skip it? Or do I have, what's the
Well,
requirement
the
to?
30-foot requirement is just to arrive at a number of total street trees for the entire frontage, but the way you space them is subject to these spacing requirements. So as much as possible, they're gonna try to get them evenly spaced, but it's gonna change based on these requirements.
Okay, so it's possible that I might not have to plant one of my trees because of the
It's possible,
utility?
and then we would provide options to pay fee in lieu instead of planting, because you would.
But I want to plant it, and you're not letting me. I don't want to pay a fee.
Well, if you want to plant it, we could probably work with you on an alternative location.
But then I think.
Yeah, we have
allow you
a
to
provision that would allow you to
25 feet
plant in
apart.
your front yard
Yeah,
within just some close proximity to the back of the sidewalk or someplace like that.
okay. I'm just being the devil here.
Yeah, that's good.
Can we,
You're not being the devil. devil's
segue
advocate.
to,
Nope, nope.
I think we need to make some significant changes to the fee in lieu of issue.
Yeah, okay, yeah, we should discuss that too.
Well, just briefly, my concern is that we have people, unfortunately, and I'm shocked to have to say this in our beautiful community, who would just as soon chop the tree down and then go, oh, okay, I chopped it down, now I'm gonna pay a fee in lieu of. And I don't think people should be allowed to take out a street tree and then just throw money at the problem. I think they should be required to replant it, or the fee should be of a substantial nature that they will be thinking twice about doing this again, because we,
Yeah, at one point.
this is just, it's just been rampant in the city. It's really been discouraging. I can't tell you, I've heard from the Oregon City Parks Foundation, I've heard from my neighborhood association, I've heard from Berkeley Hills, I've heard from Gaffney Lane. It's just all over the
Now, wait
place.
a minute, wait,
They-
you forgot somebody.
Rivercrest.
No, Fred Meyer.
Can I explain a little
Shopping
bit?
in Fred Meyer, aisle number 3. That's,
There's a tree there.
no,
No,
that's
that's
where you
where
get a lot of your feedback, don't you?
Well, it's not aisle number 3.
Oh, is it?
Anyway,
It's aisle 14.
Can I explain what our process is?
Yes.
So, yeah, if you want to remove and replace the street tree, then you have to comply with these standards and it requires a free permit through the planning division. There are certain instances where you can do a fee in lieu. It's not, you have to work your way to that. You can't just remove whatever tree you want and get a fee in lieu. If you have a narrower planter strip, because back in the day, some of the planter strips that were approved were too narrow. I mean, we've seen some like 16-inch ones. I mean, they've been pretty small. So if it doesn't meet, if it's too narrow, you can do a fee in lieu, or you can plant it on your front yard. The fee in lieu fee now is like $342 or $350-ish, which has been an incentive. The fee is based off the actual time it takes us to get, it was originally based off if Public Works were to buy a tree and plant the tree. And the cost of the tree with that too. And so that's how the fee was originally came about, but you cannot just wholesale remove all your street trees and not have street trees if you don't want to. You have to have circumstances in which why you can't replant them.
Well,
I wish that was so. I know places that are in my neighborhood where they have removed the street tree, they have not planted any street trees, or they did a whack and chop job. I'm not talking about the people that have got special circumstances with too narrow of this, or I'm talking about indiscriminate removal, because there is a value to having a mature tree that provide, I mean, we all know all this stuff from, and if we are serious about being a tree city, then we need to get serious about this fee in lieu of, because it's just not working. It lets people get off, in my opinion, without dealing with the consequences of what that tree removal affects, not only the street, but the surrounding properties. There's value to that tree.
First off, if you ever see anything like that, just give us a list
we've
of
been
those. I want to
reporting
make sure that they do have approval, because we have a
drive
lot
up
that don't.
15th Street,
Yeah.
half the blocks are naked.
Well, I'm just saying,
15th
please
is
tell the
white
city.
planters too.
There have been numerous articles in the Oregon City News that have pointed out the problem with the city's tree removal issues. It has been reported again and again and again, and that's why I'm bringing it up, because it's been so blatant. There are
Well-
people who are supposed to be planting trees, they have not done it. There are people who have planted what I consider to be fairly little wimpy trees. Just,
Yeah.
I just want to, I'll be honest, I want to throw the book at them, because they have taken away something of value to our community.
And
it's-
along those lines, I noticed that you have a provision for when people are paying to Public Works for improvements, it's 150% of the cost to deal with, potential inflation. So right off the bat, you've got 150% of the cost already kind of coded. And I think as a minimum, that would be where you'd want to go with any sort of fee in lieu of is, hey, it may be 3 years before we get around to putting that tree back, that you gave us a fee in lieu of. The money you just gave us isn't going to cover that tree anymore because time has gone on. So we're losing money if we're not immediately replacing trees. And these little forests that we're planting to as mitigation sites are kind of a joke. But so I think at the very least, it needs to be the same as it is for the Public Works mitigation. And I think it's 150%, I believe, is what it said.
Do you have a specific page for that?
No, I
Well,
don't.
if you can find it, that
Yeah,
would be good.
and then, I said, I think last meeting or meeting before, I hate street trees and I don't think we should have them, but, we'll go, well, I've already said it, so, well, won't open that can of worms right now. But yeah, like I said, I think she's right. There needs to be some sort of,
Disincentive.
yeah, there we go. Not necessarily a penalty, but a
No, it's a
disincentive.
disincentive.
And like I said, it costs, if we don't immediately plant as soon as we get the check, inflation is going to make it cost us money. And so we need to have some sort of hedge against that. So,
There are people in this community throughout the metropolitan area. Said, that tree's mine, I got a right to cut it down.
Yeah,
I mean, that's their property. I have property rights, and one of them is to cut that tree down. Just dare me,
Yeah.
double dare me.
Well, it's a little more nuanced in the case of street trees because
Yes, it is.
that is in the right of way and the abutting property owner is obligated to care
Maintain
for
it,
that.
yeah.
And so some people don't like that and some people are okay with it. If it was a clear black and white line where the tree was on one side and the maintenance was on one side, that would be a little different, but as it is, that street tree adds to everybody's enjoyment of the street.
It provides
And
cooling.
includes the property
Yeah,
owner.
cooling, I mean, it's gonna cool that asphalt. Last week when it was hot, I happened to take my shoe off because I had a rock in it and I put my foot down on the asphalt. That was hot
Yeah,
and I was in the shade.
it's got that benefit too.
And I said, oh my Lord, good thing I'm not, I mean, I feel sorry for dogs.
The fee in lieu, just to follow up, it is 150%. It's on the bottom of page 231 in subsection D, the second line.
So,
I was almost there, I was at 225.
You are just good, Damon.
red lines to do to 1208.
You get the prize for memorizing everything. I think Vern would concur with that.
Yeah, more numbers than I want.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too.
Okay,
My brain's already full of
So at
stuff.
least that would make it a consistency within the code.
Right.
And so,
okay.
Are we talking about the fee in lieu for public works stuff?
yeah,
Okay,
that's where I got the
that's
150%. Yeah, that's where I got the 150%
I
from.
don't see the 150%.
The second line. The fee shall be
Okay.
150%.
When you have when you do it like that, where it says the fee shall be 150%, generally what you do in parentheses is you put the number when you write it out. That way it's
Right.
really clear, because people will miss the words.
They'll see 50%, or
Yeah.
they'll see,
Yeah.
they'll see what they want to see. Right, Bob?
Okay,
Whatever you say, Dan.
Right.
okay, so
Okay,
now,
150% of the estimated cost of, but I mean, to give you an example about trees, I had a situation where one of my street trees that I planted in 93 decided it wasn't gonna behave anymore, and it sent a root right up under the sidewalk, which I thought was pretty amazing, because it's a fairly wide sidewalk, and it was infiltrating my stone wall. Saw the root come up next to the wall, and that wall's holding up my property, so I could not go there. So I came in, I talked to Tony, and I said, and the tree was probably about like that, because it was 93, and we had planted it when it was about like that. I said, I need to take this out. I said, this hurts me because I remember digging this hole, have a picture of my son standing in the hole. You can't see him because the hole's that deep. I said, but I can't replace this wall. This wall is serious. And he said, okay, yeah, you can take the tree out, but I want you to be able to plant 5 other trees somewhere else in the neighborhood. And I looked at him and I said, I don't think so. He said, well, that's a city street tree. I said, no, I planted those, and I brought in a picture of my son in the hole with the tree. And I said, no, I paid for those street trees myself, because we didn't have any, and my neighbor said, why don't you plant some street trees? So I planted them. So I was able to work something out with the city where I removed the tree, replaced the sidewalk, which I also had to do, got it out from under the sidewalk, because I had to take the sidewalk out to get the root out, and then I replanted. And it was right about the time the neighborhood was going to be doing a planting with Friends of Trees. So I signed a statement signing my life away, saying that as part of the Friends of Trees street tree planting, I would replace the tree and put a root barrier, blah, 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 blah. And I mean, the tree cost me $35, and it was on the city's list. And it was just a way that we were able to work it out. But I mean, it just hurt me to have to take that tree out. And people said, why are you taking the tree out? And I said, you see that little root right there? That wall is worth more than that street tree.
I'm glad you brought up Friends of Trees. That is what we do with the tree mitigation money. And it's about the price of a tree costs us how much it costs to get a tree planted. So we subsidize the cost of the tree, but it also includes that educational and community component. So we're actually very excited about that.
But
Program in
what
general,
Damon was
but-
saying too is that it needs to get planted sooner than
Yeah.
later.
right.
We hear that. Speaking of trees, let's talk about on-site
Okay.
trees.
So chapter 1741,
On site?
yeah, we're talking about trees planted on
Not on the
private
street.
property.
Okay,
And we're renaming this chapter from tree protection to tree protection, preservation, removal, and replanting standards, just to be explicit.
I never did figure out why they wanted you to plant.
Section headers have been renamed in some
And you
places.
say it's a conflicting code provision?
Pardon?
You say, it says your conflicting code provision. 1741-030.
030, yeah. So we have 4 sections of code that deals with trees. This particular section deals with trees that are required to be planted as a condition of development review, whether you're residential or not. And then it also will the third bullet down, I just want to clarify what that says. Input from public works staff, because stormwater ponds and pedestrian and bicycle access ways, which are these 15-foot wide access strips from between a cul-de-sac and a main road so that people can walk directly between those dead
Sure.
ends. Those are public, dedicated, and publicly maintained. And they have specific planting requirements of their own. So what we're specifying is that those calculations are done separately. And then the number of,
Where's that at?
that's under page 210 at the top of the page.
Why would we be planting trees in a pedestrian and bicycle access way?
Well, there's a 3-foot planter strip on either side of it that, yeah, has most of it's evergreen shrubs, but there's a requirement for some trees as well.
It's an easement, right?
It's
20 foot or something like that.
It's either an easement or a dedication. It can be both. So what that's gonna say is the number of trees, the number of replacement trees.
Yes. Yes.
So if someone's removing trees from a development site, the number of replacement trees is gonna be calculated separately based on this chapter. And stormwater ponds and pedestrian access ways are gonna be calculated using those sections.
Have we ever planted any trees in a stormwater facility?
Most of the time they're on the,
The upper edge, that's what I
Yeah,
thought. So they
yeah.
wouldn't be down in where the,
right. If
The one
there's
by
like
the
a
high
step
school
back,
is
sometimes there's sufficient
got
room to
cottonwood
plant it,
store
but
around it.
it's not down in the bottom,
no, that's what I
because that's the
thought.
wet part.
Neighborhood associations
Yeah.
will do that.
That's pretty,
Beautiful.
that's all for that section.
It happened, not in the bottom, but.
Pete,
on
how
the
long
top,
does it
top
take
fence.
Is that okay?
for the
Yeah,
administration?
it's still there and it's
Something like that.
maintained by the city.
To
and
follow
everything.
through and make sure it's done and,
Well, if it's, there's a 2-year warranty period once they get once they've done the improvements and they've submitted an as-built, the 2-year warranty period for the trees starts. And if there's any dead trees at the end of the 2-year warranty period, they have to replace them.
Yeah, and I think that's too short of a time frame.
2 years? That's pretty standard in the industry.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean it works,
I know.
especially with current climatic conditions
Yeah,
changing.
that's true.
Yeah.
Can we
it's
take
been
a
hot.
5-minute break?
Yep, sure. Yeah. I will pause it.
It's probably due to change the recording anyway.
Oh, I just think if people
embarrassed now.
We're
My point
unmuted.
being, he took my first communion pictures down in Corvallis.
And he moved here?
And he moved here, ended up taking all the sports pictures in Oregon City. The first family photograph that I paid for before Dad died, he took. And
All right, you guys ready?
are we ever, we're born ready.
All right.
Okay.
Should we tell them to speak for yourself?
Land divisions, so this is pretty straightforward. We're combining minor partition chapter and the subdivision chapter into the same chapter. Specifying that the preliminary plat be drawn by a surveyor, because that wasn't a previous requirement.
A licensed one, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Was it giving any problem prior to this?
We never had anybody that wasn't a
Well-
licensed PLS.
Minor partitions, sometimes people would turn in less than standard
We
preliminary
got one
plat.
once on a napkin. We had to basically say we couldn't accept that.
Yeah,
Yeah, you'll need it by the time you get recorded with the
you're gonna need
survey.
it anyway, so
Yeah.
you may as well have it.
Yeah. Have you ever done a minor partition yourself?
I'm working with your gal down in Lincoln City.
Oh, you're
On
doing a
one.
minor partition?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did, not a minor partition, but I did my very first survey of my very own.
It gets expensive.
Yeah,
Minor petitions.
but having a surveyor do it at
Oh,
the
yeah, gee, they are.
beginning is actually helpful to
Subdivision
the
is what I
applicant.
found
Yep.
out was
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah, that's
So
what we
with
do minor
respect to
partition.
tracts in our thinking in the code are actually portions of a plat that are left over or unbuildable, or potentially something that's used to protect a tree
You're defining
grove
that.
or an open space area. We're clarifying that those types of pieces of ground in a subdivision are exempt from certain dimensional standards, like a lot would be.
You know,
Yeah.
Pete, what you're doing here, and the public doesn't really recognize it, but the law does, is you're creating a legal record in the terms of property management, sales, recording, because a record of how property is handled by the government, really, 50 years from now, it might be the source of a lawsuit or something like that.
I just wish we still did, insurance rate maps, because those were the best. Do you want to define, I know that the term surveyor is a term of art, but you could say surveyor as defined by the state of Oregon, because they have to be licensed. I mean, you can't just call yourself a surveyor, like some people call themselves designers, but they're not really architects, but they do plans.
Yeah, just,
So-
the code language refers to licensed surveyors.
Okay, because I didn't see, when you define it here in this chapter, it doesn't say that. And nobody's gonna go back and read the definitions.
Okay?
Some people do, but they're like me, they're crazy, they read them.
They're just being clear about what the submittal criteria are for a plat, preliminary plat, and that it needs to be signed by the property owner. Previously, there was some ambiguity about what types of, when you check the difference between a preliminary plat and a final plat, it talked about them having to be substantially similar, but it didn't specify what that meant. So we're clarifying that by saying that a final plat could be substantially similar if if it meets all of the requirements in the code and has one additional lot.
Well, that's what I was gonna ask you. Let's say
yeah.
I start out with a 2-lot proposal and all of a
that's-
sudden I come back and I go, oh, now it's X many lots. It's not,
Yeah.
that's definitely not substantially the same.
So.
For minor partitions.
Minor partitions are different. So what it says is, all modifications to a land division that has received final plat approval, so it's received final plat approval but is not platted, and result in the increase of any lots for a minor partition or of 2 or more lots for, this is not written well.
And that's page
Top of page 34.
4. Okay, I'm on page 30.
So any increase in lots for a minor partition or an addition of 2 or more lots for a subdivision shall go back through the process.
So when you're saying that they've received final plat approval from the local government, but it's not yet platted, you mean not yet recorded?
Not yet recorded, yes.
I don't know if people know what that platted means.
Yeah, okay. I think this
They can hire an
section should
attorney to
be
find out, right?
I hope
a
not.
little bit, I'll shorten the sentences so that it's separated into 2 sentences, one for minor partition, one for subdivision. So what we would do is review the preliminary plat again. However, we would only look at the sections of the preliminary plat criteria that apply to the addition of the lots.
That's at the administrative level. You'd review it.
Well, we'd go back through the, whatever process it was originally reviewed through, which is generally going to be a type 2 review.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're saying if it's 2 or more lots for a subdivision, that's a change.
That's a significant
If
change.
it's a minor minor partition can only be 3 anyway, so
Right, any change in a minor partition.
partition would seem to me, because if you go from, well, they wouldn't be doing a minor partition for 1 lot, because minor partition is generally always 2. Trying to get 2 lots out of something.
Well, it actually creates 3 new
So-
lots, right?
It
Well, you
removes
have the
the,
one, you
You
create the
have
one.
the original that
Right,
you
and then
start
you have a
with,
second
plus
discretion.
2.
in
So,
that case.
and then what about the flag lots, which is, the bane of my existence?
Flag lots, the requirement for the width of the flagpole would go from 8 feet to 10 feet. And then, basically what we've said is that you've gotta abut a street other than an alley for at least 20 feet unless you're a flag lot. And flag lots are only permitted in these situations where there's a parcel configuration or a topographic constraint or an existing dwelling in the way, or you can't meet your minimum density criteria or your other dimensional standards, and you've got to therefore propose a flag lot. In general, we want lots to have their full street frontage of 20 feet.
So are we trying to make it a little more difficult for someone to create a flag lot as part of a subdivision?
No, I think we're just clarifying what the requirements are for the.
I don't know
for
why
the-
anybody would want to live on a flag lot.
And that includes clarifying the
You
pavement
don't control
requirements
what's
that
in
they
front
have
of
to
you, it
have.
just could be like hell on wheels.
Now on to lot averaging.
Okay, so hang on with.
Oh, sorry.
With flag
Yep.
lots, so you have 1608-050, you're just talking about flag lots in general?
In general, because everything is combined into land division now from minor partition and subdivision.
Okay, so let's say I own a piece of property. Matter of fact, I was looking at all those properties abutting Lynn Avenue from Holmes going west, and those are some deep lots.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, would they be able to create flag lots, or would they be able to create ADUs, or could they do something else with those? So
Yeah.
if I have a lot and I create 2 lots and one of them's a flag lot, you're saying, so are we, I guess the question is it a policy decision that we want to continue to create flag lots, or we really kind of don't really want?
Well,
flag lots?
originally, they said they're prohibited. And so in 2010, we
We
added
never
this.
prohibited them before that.
They might have been, yeah.
We did, yeah, I mean, we allowed them when I worked at the city. We didn't get a lot of them, but
Right.
we scrutinized them quite carefully, particularly the fire department scrutinized them.
And in 2010, we added the criteria that you could only do them under these circumstances.
Okay,
So we were kind of saying you gotta have a kind of a hardship situation. And then clarifying that you've got to share the access so that you reduce the amount of driveway cuts.
so you couldn't have you couldn't have your flag lot driveway and then your other driveway.
Not unless it was an unusual situation, it was unavoidable.
What about an existing house with a driveway
Yeah.
and you create a flag lot next to that?
That could potentially happen, but I haven't seen it
Okay.
yet.
Well,
Yeah.
One thing that we've done, I think a really good job at in the last 5 to 10 years, 5 years, is requiring people to do shadow plats of how everyone
Yeah,
else around them is
connectivity
gonna develop.
requirement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
every 10 years.
Yeah,
So
that's for subdivision. I'm talking about minor partition.
You see,
Yeah.
so same.
Now we
this-
require for both.
We require it for both, and so what we've seen is like an example, I don't know, 5 years ago or something, we did a minor partition on, I think it was Warner Parrott. There was
Yeah,
some on
there's
Holcomb
some
too,
there
so
too.
actually a lot of different places where the scenario is planned out, where they'll show a future street connection coming through, but right now it's just long lots. And so the access way for now is through a flag lot, but we plan for a future street connection coming into that property, so those flag lots will eventually all go
All
away.
disappear.
So we're looking at both the short term as well as the long term.
It's like
How
a-
often,
An
how often
easement
did
that
that
becomes
happen?
a dedication.
I can think
Yeah.
of 3 times that we've done it, where it's, again, only in the situation where you have these really long, narrow lots and they're kind of all
And they're
around.
fronting on a collector or higher level road. So that you want to try to minimize.
Okay, so you're saying
Yeah.
under B that you have to have a joint access way unless the existing topography or the location of an existing dwelling unit? Is that what you mean an existing dwelling unit, not that somebody would build one and cause the problem?
The original
Existing.
house.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah.
do you want to say an existing dwelling unit? Because it just says the dwelling unit.
I'm looking at a different section that you.
I'm looking at section 1608-050B.
B, okay,
Says a joint access way, blah, blah, blah,
okay.
unless
Or
the
the
existing
existing
topography
dwelling
of the
unit.
site or the dwelling unit is located on the property to prevent a joint access way.
Oh, yeah, okay,
We don't want anybody to create
okay,
a house
yeah,
that would cause the problem.
yeah, that's a good point.
I can see somebody doing that.
Okay. And the other language is the same, it's just been relocated from the
Okay.
minor partition code.
And do we have a provision that prohibits people from having multiple dwelling units off of a flag lot?
No, we don't currently have that.
I've only seen that happen a couple of times, but it's not good.
No, because they have to shadow plat it, so they never really get to the place where that is an issue, because we want street connectivity above all.
Right. I've seen where like 2 flag lots, one was the long one in the back, and then there was a second flag lot that went off of this one, and then you had the main house. It was just like, that was a nightmare. Don't want to do that.
So while you're on that point, though, I do see where we could add a stipulation that you can, a further stipulation that flag lots would be only permitted where, in addition to the other items, but street connectivity is not practicable.
Okay, that would be good. That would go under C,
I think I would put it under A.
go under A. Okay. Where an applicant can show, okay, flag lots are not permitted except where the applicant can show that the existing parcel configuration, topographic constraints, or where an existing dwelling unit is located so that it precludes a land division that meets the minimum requirements. Okay, so you'd add it in there.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Okay. And then, if,
So we're gonna add street connectivity, okay.
yeah. Finally, lot averaging,
Oh,
this has
my
been
favorite topic.
much discussed. And no changes proposed to this except to stipulate that lot averaging is only going to be permitted for single-family detached units. And that
And where's that?
would be in 27, page 27. Where are we?
Laura, I made a suggestion and while you were out of the room about flag lots. The word, it says that have received final plat approval but have not platted. So I said maybe it should say not yet recorded, because a lot of people don't know what,
Right.
don't know what plat, I mean, I know what it is, but that doesn't mean Bob knows what it is, or
No, I don't know what it is.
you do know what it is, I know you know. You were doing plats before Vern and I were even born.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was.
Actually, I think lot averaging is not in
I'll find it.
1608, it's in,
We changed the name.
it's in the development standards, 1612.
I'll find it if you want to move on.
Okay. Street design standards, these have been moved from chapter 12.08 to 1612. And what's remaining in 12.08 are the ongoing maintenance and standards for public works, rather than development standards for new street layouts. And this helps us consolidate and apply the street design standards to all development, site plan, design review, et cetera. The maximum block length requirements in the general industrial and other zones are being removed.
I think we're gonna run out of material.
Certain properties would be allowed to have 2 driveways if they front a major street. The construction standards for street design have been put in, they're gonna be put in a specification manual for public works engineering. Alleys, now this is something we discussed coming out of the equitable housing. The alley requirement is principally gonna be confined to the concept plan areas, in the medium, high density and mixed use zones.
What about the areas that already have existing alleys?
Well, those would not be affected. I suppose if there was redevelopment in and near those alleys, we could, the code is written in such a way, it says that alleys shall be required unless there are permanent provisions for access to the site.
I'm thinking of
approved.
a house that got constructed in McLaughlin that takes its access from an
From
alley.
From an alley, yeah.
This is just creation of new
Well,
land
that would-
divisions, though.
And you wanted that to be required or not?
No,
not
I'm just saying
permitted?
that there needs to be some sort of, I thought that there was some standard by
Yeah,
which they were
To-
required to pave a portion of it.
oh, to pave it.
Yeah, I mean, to make some improvement to it, since they were gonna be, I mean, this was an alley that wasn't really used very much, and
I
now all of a
see.
sudden you got somebody that's accessing it,
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
on a regular basis to get to their place.
Right,
You know, I live on a lot that used to take access off an alley to the backyard,
Uh-huh.
and boy, I'm telling you, how convenient.
It is
Oh,
convenient.
wow, I'm telling you. I wasn't that far from the other street, like this, but I couldn't get to the backyard and the back door through any kind of a access off the street, so it came off the alley, and I'm telling you, it was really,
Yeah, I know several properties in McLaughlin that use the alley to access the back part of their house, because that's where the garage
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's,
yeah. right.
it's
Okay.
part of the public right of way. they're not being required to pay, but I mean, we have a lot, and there's a lot of utilities in the alleys in McLaughlin.
Okay.
I mean, that's how he platted it, there are alleys everywhere.
We'll talk to Development Services and see where they would put that requirement, because that would be a
I'm not saying that they would have to pave it, but there should be
Yeah.
something that takes in, that maybe a little caveat that says, if there is an existing alley, blah, blah,
Right.
blah,
repaving.
that
Yeah.
you need to do,
Or maybe
I don't know, maybe
upgrading.
they need to do something, or
I think they would require that now. Maybe they've missed it in the
I think
past.
I think they.
There's, yeah, right now, if you do a house, you have to spend up to 10% of the valuation of the house or additions of more than 50% towards street improvements. And aside from that, Public Works does have
In
separate
addition to that.
standards for how you access a new house off an alley. It's pretty rare, but we'll take a look.
Okay.
It's just, I mean, I'm just,
This
because
sec-
there's still some platted alleys in Rivercrest, aren't there?
Yes, yeah, this is what I'm talking about.
So it may not only apply to, I mean, at least ones that are existing. I mean, there are places like Kanema, which those alleys are never gonna be built because they're just,
Yeah.
Streets are
Well,
different.
these
We'll
are-
take
How
a
about
look
the
at
alleys?
in chapter 1204 of the proposed code amendments is for maintenance of existing stuff as opposed to land division.
land vision,
So,
right,
yeah.
okay.
So Public Works also had an input on this, and they've clarified when the performance guarantees and when the warranty process is triggered. And so that's a lot clearer. There's removing some redundant standards about block design. Talking about how the transportation system plan drives these street standards. And then I've added violation and penalty standards. Property line abandonments and adjustments, so these
Anyway, there
are,
were quite a few,
pardon?
you had from page 35 to 59, and I'm just flipping through them, so. When Public Works reviews stuff regarding street trees is,
Okay,
I don't mean to say anything terrible, but this may come out weird. How is the public to know that whoever's reviewing this has some experience with street trees? I mean, I don't generally think of engineers as being street tree conscious. That's kind of us planners, we do that.
well, they do go through us, and then we'll look at it.
Okay,
So, and they'll ask us questions, and so if you're referring to,
it was something you said about that they also review, and I'm thinking, wait a minute.
yeah, so in terms of the species, they defer to the planning department and then,
We have the adopted street tree
We have
list,
the
or is it
recommended
approved
list.
by an arborist? And so, then we also have the spacing standards. Public Works does require the utilities to put on the street tree plan so that we have a better idea of where they're actually going to limit conflicts. But
Do they have
there's
a-
not a lot of discretion in it, I guess
Okay,
is what I'm
let
saying.
me ask you another question about as we know, there are dueling professionals. So when you say a certified arborist, I'm not saying that this has happened, but let's say a situation comes up where the arborist says that, oh, this tree there's something terribly wrong with it. And let's say there's nothing really wrong with the tree, but the owner is saying, I want this down or whatever. I mean, I'm just throwing stuff out there.
yeah, I understand. Our certified arborists can disagree.
I understand that. As we have with engineers and water resource people, anybody, lawyers, your favorite.
I guess we have to look at the situation where the recommendation is for either removal or retention and what the condition of the tree is. And if it looks, in the past, we've deferred to the expertise of those professionals as long as they were.
Has anybody ever had a situation where they got an arborist and the decision or the opinion of the arborist was contrary to what the proposal was?
Yeah, there was one situation where the city had a third-party arborist review what two other arborists had said, and it had to do with designation of heritage tree, which was a
Right.
different situation
yeah.
entirely. And it was very costly, and controversial. But in most situations on private property, that's not gonna be the case. I think we have to either have some minimums, if we're gonna
Use certified
ramp the
arborists.
standards up for our certified arborists, we probably need to specify what is contained in their report.
Okay, that may be it. I just, I guess
yeah.
in all of my
You know-
planning, I've never seen a situation where an arborist that was hired by a developer came in and said, you know, I don't really think these trees should be cut down. You know?
Right.
I mean, particularly if it's something,
On residential property, it's seldom the case.
I've never seen it, ever.
It's never the case. Commercial and institutional property a little different because, you know, they've got a little more land to play with. Residential, you've got so many requirements for,
Have we ever had a
everything
situation
else.
where there was a development proposed and there was, particularly a commercial development, where there was some leeway given for a tree because we were able to vary a lot or the way a street went because we wanted to really save this particular,
Yeah,
the Public Works has been flexible and I think they're gonna continue to be a little more flexible on the Public Works sidewalk standards. I think with,
yeah, and,
so meandering sidewalks are using a different material.
yeah, we have one on Rylands Lane that,
My,
although now I have to rake those frickin' leaves, it's not my house, but
so I think that's a possibility. It's not a mandate though.
No.
Yeah, yeah. Because their first inclination is public safety and long-term maintenance. The
yeah, we
second-
were able to meander the sidewalk because it's a really super old maple tree.
And it is, it's the magnitude of the tree, you know, necessitates a bigger solution, you know, and the mature oaks along Warner and Lynn and Malala, they have some situations where they've done that. And we would encourage that from the pre-application stage all the way through the development stage. Until it's absolutely proven that it's completely
The
impractical.
Oregon State Highway Division wanted to cut down all those trees in that
Yeah.
tree corridor on McLaughlin, and there was like, yeah, major
Yeah.
backlash.
Yeah, yeah.
They said, nope.
The bigger the tree, the more emotion.
It's one of the most pleasant places to drive on McLaughlin Boulevard. When you come
Yep.
through there, it's where you can see people just kind of calm
Yeah.
down a little bit.
Yeah,
It's very soothing, and it provides, you know, it's one of those canopies.
yeah, so,
They haven't replanted the ones that they had to take out yet, but we'll see.
You know, when I first got involved in planning back in the 60s, McLaughlin Boulevard from Oregon City to Milwaukee was nothing but fir trees.
Was it?
That's fir trees, It's like going through the redwoods.
Wow.
And we zoned it residential from Oregon City to Milwaukee.
I would have loved to have seen that.
And
Okay.
it was a sight to behold.
property line adjustments, and we're almost done here. We've got 4 more slides. So we're clarifying the submittal requirements on this, and we're adding in relevant approval criteria that they need to conform to. Before it just said all other aspects of the code, but we're specifying that includes frontage requirements, subdivision density, et cetera, and other things like that. Process isn't changing. Definition section, chapter 17.04. It's the largest section of your packet, but it really only adds in definitions for the new housing types that we've talked about. It's removing some definitions we don't use. We've talked about the height definition, and we're including definitions for net developable area. That'd be a new one, an amendment to that. Manufactured home, multifamily, residential, and story, and the rest of those are in the packet. If you have any questions about those, we could go through that, but. Then we're on to administration and procedures section. So this is principally clarifications. It doesn't change any of the existing standards. The one thing that is going to change is we're recommending that type 3 and above notices be posted on the city website rather than in the newspaper. We would continue to notify the neighborhood associations and the CIC and do all of the other mailings and on-site sign notices, but most people use our website. They don't know about the newspaper or care to look in the newspaper, so it's really not something that's an effective way to notify people.
Does that meet the requirements in ORS 197?
It does.
Apparently, yes, according to Carrie.
And it's just, I think the taxpayer money could be better spent. Not that nobody has seen it. I haven't had anyone I haven't had anyone tell me that they read about something in the ad section of the paper.
Oh, I did.
But you said something and Damon said something the other day.
You guys,
So
yeah, that's
That's
true.
for what it's worth. We haven't really heard it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but it's just the amount of money you spend on it and the return on that money when we have so many other avenues.
Does the city utilize any of this, and I don't know if this terminology is correct, telephones and texting, and do we have
You mean like a text alert public notice?
Yeah, even an Amber Alert for,
It sends when you
Somebody's being held
emergencies.
hostage with their land use application.
right.
Yeah, it's reserved for emergencies.
when we post the land use items on the website, from my understanding, it could send through an RSS feed, sends an email.
If you've signed up for that
Yeah.
via the website, you will get automatic emails whenever something's changed on the website.
So whenever any land use gets
Yeah.
posted,
You
if
get
you
those,
want.
Bob?
So if you subscribe to land use notices via the city,
I get a bunch of those, and I'm still a little curious about reading some of them. But it's
Good.
it's optional that you comment on it or anything.
it's an invitation to
We
comment.
send them, see, you have a lot of hats, so we send them to every neighborhood association
That's right.
chair. And we also send them every CIC
CIC.
member.
I look at every one
If you
of
didn't
them
get it
and
one
say,
place,
okay.
you would have got it 4 more other
Say,
places.
is this in my neighborhood? No. Okay, wait a minute, where's this?
Well, I can usually tell by the planner as to whether I really want to, and that's probably not a good judgment.
No,
by
because you
either,
don't
but
know which one you're working on.
I'll go down through it and see who the applicant is and who the planner is and
The planter?
planner.
So on the neighborhood association meeting, the requirement to meet with the neighborhood association is the critical part of the code. We want to require that. And whatever happens in the neighborhood association meeting, we want proof that it happened. We don't need to see a sign-in sheet. What we do request is a summary from the applicant of what was discussed. It's fairly easy to verify that they actually held the meeting. So what we're asking to do is just allow notification of the neighborhood association via email rather than requiring the applicant to send a certified mail invitation to the neighborhood association and CIC.
I don't think it has to be certified, they could just send
Yeah,
a first-class letter to the neighborhood association. I don't think the certified
and
is really warranted.
and depending on the neighborhood association, they're used to interacting via email.
Email's better
But
But
so-
sometimes whoever those people are,
Yeah.
if I've never
Yeah.
received an email from them, they just don't go anywhere. Because they go in the junk box.
Okay, it's a concern.
Well, it is, because it some people's computers, depending on what's going on, it considers that spam.
So just regular mail would be,
I mean, at some point too, we have had developers who are having a hard time getting a hold of neighborhood associations if they can't. So yeah, we don't give out everyone's phone number
I
like
know.
that. So we've had people call us and then we'll
Well, that's why
either call
they could
them or
send them
send them an email
They
to
could
be
send
like,
them a
hey.
first-class letter with a 50-cent stamp to wherever address it is for the neighborhood association. That way they've covered both their bases. So the one concern, this just happened to me, is that I never received a copy of the quote-unquote summary from the developer about what happened at the meeting, and that's not kind of what happened. So I sent in a revision saying, no, this is not what happened at the meeting.
That brings up a point.
So I think maybe the neighborhood association should be responsible for also supplying part of their minutes about that section of the meeting.
That's what we do in Hillendale and Tower Vista, is the clerk will take the, what we discussed and all of that, and write a report around the recommendation, and send it to, I suspect, CIC and to probably you, and,
Or the city recorder.
What we have right
No,
now
not
is
the
the
recorders,
option.
it's-
So here's the problem that we encounter is that sometimes not all neighborhood associations are as diligent as you are about getting those summaries out, and it sort of holds that development hostage. And so,
I think it's responsibility on both sides.
but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The point of the meeting is to start a dialogue between the two. But what the city wants to see is that you've met. That is what we want to start that conversation, right? And so we wanted to streamline our standards. You just say, show us that you've met. Someone give us a summary of something to show that you talked about more than Starbucks or sports or something. And that's about it. We're not even really looking at what it says. We're just looking at that you met. And that some development was
Yeah,
discussed.
we've had applications come in where it was one thing when they met with us, and then when it came through in the land use thing, it was something completely different. So I've kind of said, well, we didn't really meet about this because that's not what we saw.
Unless it was a different property or
No,
if it
it
was a
was-
different project, they're expected to tweak slightly. I mean,
Oh, no, this was more
really,
than
they
a
should
tweak.
be tweaked slightly based off some conversations, but they don't have to.
No, they don't.
So
But it
as long as
definitely-
the essence is there,
it
that's the
definitely
requirement, is just to have the
It wasn't,
conversation.
it was more than the essence is what I'm saying.
it's really not a commitment between the neighborhood and the developer. It should be a good
in a
interchange
way-
You're not looking, the
of
neighborhood's not
information.
looking at criteria.
It, in a way, it is a little bit of a commitment because this is what they're representing that they are going to do. So people who are at the meeting go away thinking, oh, well, that's what they're gonna do. And then you come back and that's not what they said they were gonna do. They've changed and said, well, we're gonna do this. So that's what my concern is. It's because sometimes there's a long lag time between when they're doing X and then they do Y.
But the purpose of the meeting is to put the neighbors on notice so that when they see the development come in, that they're already thinking of ways to
Ways to
participate
participate.
and comment. It's not that neighbors need to okay it without any criteria, it's
We
just
don't,
that.
we
we don't
don't.
get into the criteria at those neighborhood meetings or any detail.
We don't even do
We should-
recommendations.
We should do the lot and what they're doing, and that's about it, and have a discussion, and occasionally, we had one the other day that the applicant came back with an email and says, hey, I haven't got your letter yet from the neighborhood association saying we met. And that was just a lapse.
Reminder.
So the letter went out, and
Do you guys make a recommendation every time, even though it's very preliminary?
I wouldn't, I don't know what the word is, recommendation. We say we met with them, we discussed some pros and cons, and it's not a certified
Yeah.
recommendation or anything like that.
We usually say that when we see the final proposal, we will make a recommendation, but we're not prepared to do one. Because generally they come in and there's 10 minutes and they're going, and you're like, ah!
Okay, so we're hearing that you would recommend requiring first-class mail in addition to email.
Yeah, because I mean, first-class mail, everybody can afford a piece. I never thought the certified thing was warranted.
Right.
Because usually it's certified, sometimes they want somebody to sign for it. What if you're not there? You know,
Are you sure you want mail in addition to the email, though?
I'm not sure of that.
I think it's
because
just covering
it
one's
comes
base.
through another channel, and we should get the email.
Right now it says or.
Immediately, and the certified, somebody's gotta go to the
No,
post
no, not
office.
certified, I'm saying first-class mail.
And
Oh, you say first class?
Yes, first class, not certified. We have a PO box, so our PO box gets checked on a regular basis. If something was in there, it would get checked.
I mean, the thing is that the developer needs a response from the neighborhood so
Yes,
that they can
absolutely.
schedule it.
That way, because it's just like the old fax. Oh, did you get my fax? Oh, did you get my email? Well, you know, it's the same thing.
Can we say or email or letter?
No, I think you need to, if it's gonna be both, because I know that's so when, for instance, when, what is her name? She used to work for the county.
Okay, we'll
Ray
take
Gordon
that.
was our neighborhood association president. She wouldn't always get the email, but we'd go to the mailbox and get the mail and, oh,
Yeah, the neighborhoods association chairs are gonna have to keep their addresses updated. And it's not gonna be on the website because it's private. So,
Yeah, we don't post
Yeah.
the mailing addresses of neighborhood association
well, you don't have
chairs.
to post it, but for that specific neighborhood association, you could give the applicant that
yeah,
this is the address it needs to go to.
okay.
It just doesn't hurt to do both, because again, email is like I said, the old fax. Oh, did you get my email? No, I didn't get your email.
No, the problem is just that then we need to have a submittal requirement to see the mail and to see, or if we have a requirement, we should have a follow-up
They just
requirement
have
to
a
make sure
copy
that it
of what they
happens.
sent.
Huh?
You just have a copy of the picture of the envelope, you put it in the mail, you mailed it.
I know, it's just one more thing. We gotta get a copy of the email and we gotta get a copy of the letter. I mean, that's what we were trying to streamline.
My two
That's
cents
fine.
worth would be, it's very easy for us as a neighborhood or the planning commission to say, well, contact planning department. It's just another 5-minute contact, but it takes several steps to get that letter out. I'd go with the
They could just
email.
take what they put in the email and put it in the mail.
Well,
It's just easy. I'm trying to be supportive of the United States Postal Service. They need all the mail they can get.
Okay,
Yes, but see, I made you.
final bullet here is,
Before you go to this final bullet and procedures, one of the things you guys brought up that I
okay,
took a little umbrage to, I think if somebody has a land use application and they don't get it done within 2 years, I'm sorry, it's done. It should not be able to go on forever and ever, amen. There should be an expiration date. They're like fresh meat. They do expire and they do spoil.
so.
We have that on the, you wanna go to the next slide?
Yeah,
We talked about it very briefly.
Are you,
yeah, clarifying when they expire. So
So are we clarifying when they expire?
we're clarifying when they expire. We're saying that they expire if they are not recorded. within-
Right.
What if they get, tied up in court and it's
Well,
not?
that's too bad.
Well, yeah,
Well-
I can not,
The final decision on an appeal extends the
Extends
approval.
that time period. So
Okay.
when it's final, and that's when the
Yeah.
clock starts.
Yeah,
okay.
So the other thing was this similar applications.
so there was too much discretion there for staff. So,
I don't think it was too much discretion.
you know,
No.
well, our consultants seem to think there
for
was.
similar?
Yeah,
And I think, so, okay, here's what the standard says that we're proposing to remove, is that if you are denied, you have to wait a year before you reapply.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure what that accomplishes, so that's why we're
as long as they
proposing
gotta
it.
go through the same process again, what does it accomplish?
You have the same, you have to meet the criteria and go
Because there
through the
was
same-
obviously a reason it was denied. And
but
if they,
But it can
and if
be
they
denied
keep,
again.
and if they keep coming back again and again with the same proposal, it's like the shotgun approach. So let's keep throwing it at the wall and see if it finally gets, no.
But
If you get denied, go away.
If it doesn't meet
Figure
the
it out.
criteria,
What do you
it will
guys
not
think?
be approved.
Right, I understand that, but why let them come back for 5 or 6 more bites of the apple? That's what I'm asking. What is the downside of having them wait?
I need to get a clarification, I guess. If they
Okay.
come through with an application and it's denied,
Right,
do they go, and it may be halfway through the
so
application?
currently the code says if you are denied, you gotta wait a year.
Right, but they go back to the pre-app?
And you go back to the pre-app.
The very front.
Add a
which-
year later.
Which
A year
and
later.
it is a
Okay.
year.
Yeah, and where is that?
Yeah, it seems as though it's, I don't know what the problem is that applicant may have, but he's gonna pay the money again in 5 months or a year, whichever.
They usually don't come back, which is kind of what we're worried
Here's the problem, here's the thing that we were trying to solve is that they come back, but they come back a little bit different. And so we have these definitions for substantially similar or not. And we're trying to figure out, is it a little bit different enough to come back within the 1 year? Because if it's substantially similar, you've got to wait a year. If it's not substantially similar, if it's more different, you can come back before the year. And so it's like us trying to figure out how different is different enough with these standards, but were too discretionary for us and we want more clarity.
Never
And
had a
so
problem with it.
that coupled with why are we even waiting a year in the first place? This guy's put himself in timeout by starting over again is what we're trying to solve, is
It's
that
usually a guy.
I'm not sure why they're waiting a year, and then really the crux is us trying to figure out if they're substantially different or similar.
Yeah.
It's not clear for anybody, the public, us, or the,
I had several of these consistently, and we were able to make a determination that what they were proposing was basically the same thing with one very slight little modification that didn't make it different.
yeah.
And I said, you're still not gonna meet the criteria. Why are you, why are you here?
And
So
we've
even
done
if it was
that,
a
we've
minor
kicked some of these out.
modification, no. So a minor modification could be submitted right off the bat, right?
Nope.
Hypothetically.
A major modification to the change. Yeah, so it's always the
Major.
developer trying to figure
Major
out
modification.
how different is different enough to submit
defined
today
minor
versus wait a
What does our
year.
legal counsel say about this?
We have standards in their code, it's just the idea that we have to parse through something being different enough to resubmit seemed
I see, you just don't wanna
onerous.
do some more extra work here because you
True, well, no, because we want, well, that's true, not gonna deny that.
I'm being
But also-
facetious.
But also because why are we waiting a year anyway? What is that accomplishing?
It gives them time to think about what the heck they were doing
I
and
mean, if they're gonna
Well-
submit the
Try to
same
get
thing, it's still the same standards and the same, because it's all about the criteria to us. It's not
My
about
question-
punishing people, it's about
I think it's all,
criteria.
I think it's totally all about the criteria, and if they didn't get it right, it's like,
Well,
go
Then
away.
then they
are
can
we
get another
denying
denial.
anybody due access to,
Nope,
well, okay, now what do you base that on? You say no. Back it up.
sometimes people come in with,
Oh, I understand that.
as you know,
Yeah, I understand it. Yeah, and it's a
They know-
pain, it's a pain in the foot. I
yeah,
understand
and
that.
I just, I would say to some of these people, I'd say, I know you're submitting this because you know this, you know what the criteria is, you're submitting this, why are you putting yourself through this agony and the
They're rolling the dice.
and I said, look, I'll take your money, but I'm telling you, it's gonna be denied. And I don't really wanna take your money. Is there something we can do to modify this to make it meet the criteria? It's like, it's guilt, probably. Just never wanted to do that to people. It's like, just be straightforward and say, look, this isn't gonna pass.
It seems like.
Particularly if it was a staff review. It never went to the planning commission if it was just totally awful.
It seems like it's a penalty and it's a time thing, and who knows, it may be to the city's benefit that something has changed and it sails through. So are we building it's a barrier, I guess, I see it as.
We're just preventing stupid
For-
people from reapplying for things that we don't want them to apply for.
Well, I know, but are we doing that as a punishment or a personal
No,
grievance
it's a
thing
waste
gets
of staff's
involved?
time to have to go back through and review an application that's exactly the same thing or very similar to something that they already denied. To me, that is wasting staff
But
time.
that, well, it is, but it's picking up $495 for a pre-app conference.
Yeah, well, it's taken,
So
candy from a
I don't
baby.
know. It's.
Let me ask this.
okay,
question.
so requirement of payment of liens, that's always been the case. We've always required them to pay everything off before they could get a permit or recording.
Yeah, it's just making it explicit.
It's
Before
not
I
an
got-
approval
so-
criteria.
No, I know.
Before I got interrupted, let me ask a question. Have you cleared this with legal? And they say it's appropriate to put on a time limit. It is legal. You're not denying a person due access or access to due process.
It's-
And I understand what Denise is saying, you know, it's a dilemma. But how often does this happen?
It's rare.
It's rare.
I can think of a gentleman who,
But it's
Several.
like you
I think
said,
at
they're
least-
rolling the dice. They're gonna pay the money for the review. We're gonna process their land use application, and we're gonna make a recommendation based on the criteria. If it happens to be the same decision that we made last time, that's probably gonna be the case.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're here to do, is process land use applications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, it's not your only reason for living.
I agree.
It's part of, it's a part of your job, but that's not your,
We
that's
got-
Thanks for that.
not your entire job, I
I
have
got
to
people
tell you.
laughing, it's almost 10 o'clock.
I know.
You only have one slide after this. Not that you have to
Okay.
Has
be
the
here till
audience
it.
gone away? Our viewing audience gone away?
They're probably all asleep.
Okay. Is
So-
this a thing
Oh,
that
sorry.
we flip a
For the
coin for
recons-
and go forward?
What are we
Can
doing?
we chat, so reconsideration, I think is the last thing on the slide. It's on page 237 of your packet.
Where is the removal of one-year waiting period?
Top of page 237, second paragraph.
Oh, you put it way at the
Strikeout.
end. I was still on 220.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay, you're skipping around.
So it's all, that section just is struck out.
Okay, 237.
Section
236.
1750.
Okay,
220,
reapplication limited.
Reapplication limited.
So you're all, oh, well, see, you didn't say that. You also are saying here, if an application is denied or withdrawn following the close of a public hearing.
No.
So there's more there than what we're talking about here.
But it's following a public hearing, so you could withdraw before the final decision.
Yeah.
So
It's a,
it has to close the public hearing, I'm sorry. That's the key part, is the decision on a public hearing, the
But this
closure.
would only apply to decisions that have a public hearing. What about type 2 decisions?
Exactly.
No. If
It
it's
says if an
denied
application is withdrawn or
or denied,
or
Is
denied
denied
following
or-
the close of a public hearing, no reapplication for the same or similar proposal may be made for 1 year following. And you're right, it's only applying to applications where there is a public hearing.
no, because it's if the application is denied or withdrawn. First off, let's decide what we want to do with this, and then we can talk about that. So if it's denied, so type 2 denied, period, or if it's withdrawn following the close of a public hearing, period. So those are the two,
That's
either
happened.
denied or withdrawn following the close of a public hearing.
Okay.
So it could be type 2 or type more.
We had somebody withdraw prior to the close of a public hearing for HRB.
We did. So
I was there.
should we
Do you want
leave?
to
Is
table
this something you
this
want to
till
come
we
back
have,
to
we can table this and talk about it when we have more people, potentially.
next time?
Yeah, that's it.
Let's ask Paul,
Okay.
since
Okay.
he's still working
Oh, that's right,
still.
yeah.
And then the reconsideration is on the bottom of that same page.
Well, I know where that one came from.
So reconsideration is a process whereby you have 5 extra days to say, we got it wrong, let's have another crack at this.
Did you know that?
Personally, I don't like it because we should get it right. We shouldn't have that backstop to get it wrong. And then 2 is it's confusing with the approval process because we have an appeal process. So what happens when we get a reconsideration and an appeal? That's confusing. Also, it doesn't limit it to type 2, so it can be reconsideration of a planning commission or city commission decision or HRB as well.
So basically-
it's just an unclear process because it should be an order and a chain. Us, the decision, our decision should be right. We shouldn't have another crack at that. And then there's the appeal process to deal with if there are any issues, but we should get it right.
Have we ever revoked a permit or a land use approval?
Yes, we have, I can't remember off the
1750,
top of my
27, I
head.
mean, you don't have to get into details, I'm just curious.
I don't know.
So if somebody were to ask for reconsideration based on a, let's just say, a procedural error,
That'd be a different issue.
that would that still apply to this section 2260?
Yeah, we're proposing to remove 260 completely because
So
there
that
is an
would,
appeals process and then
right, so
there's
you're
a
saying the only
decision.
avenue for a procedural error would be you have to appeal it?
Or you bring up that there's a procedural error during
Right,
the process.
Procedure.
And then we can fix the procedural error. We don't want to make it procedural error
No,
either.
I mean,
It's
there,
just-
I'm not saying that there are any or have been any, but
Yeah,
in other situations,
we would have
that has
to.
been that's been a problem.
Yeah, and how this
Not here.
applies to planning commission is if we had a reconsideration of a planning commission decision, we would have to get you guys back together with like it might be a 24-hour notice, depending on what it is, to have another hearing on something that you've already decided on.
Well, if Bob's there, I'm there. I said, if you're there, I'm there.
But I think you guys get things right the first time, so you know what I mean, like we shouldn't. It's confusing because there's the appeals process to deal with what happens after said decision. That is difficult when we also have reconsideration, and the idea that we would need another crack at the apple isn't fair to applicants or the publics or people who are participating in these when we should get it right the first
Well, I
time.
understand why, but I think, there's always room for error.
Because there's always a difference of opinion.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that every decision is absolutely perfect, but
The other aspect of this that had us worried was the fact that hypothetically, this reinterpretation by
whoever,
whoever
decision maker.
wasn't publicly noticed.
You know, where I come down on this is I put my trust in due process. And that is going to be understood and regulated by our legal counsel. And I'm not experienced enough to give any legal advice on this. And half of what we're talking about tonight is legal. It has nothing to do with land use planning and the comprehensive plan and the future development of the community.
Oh, it
It's
does.
how we go about doing
It-
it, which is a legal process.
It
It's
does,
called
though.
due process.
It does, but there are plenty of people sitting in jail right now that it's been alleged that they had due process and found out that they were wrongly convicted. So I don't have as much faith in the overall process as you do, because I know that we are only human and there's room for error.
And are you suggesting that we're the ones that
No.
are gonna correct that?
No, I'm not suggesting where, I'm just saying that in the big picture of due process.
Well, your picture's bigger than mine.
Yeah, the
Okay.
bigger picture of due process,
Well, I think we all agree that what we're talking about is process here.
yeah. Well, without the process, we have people running amok.
And I turn my trust over to the legal counsel. Because it's eventually gonna get to court.
Yep.
And once it's at court, once it's there, it's really out of our hands.
Oh, I agree.
And it gets expensive.
And it's
It does.
expensive. But then's when the decision's gonna be handed down. Granted, pretty much on what we decided to do, based on the process that we adopt, okay? But that's regulated by state law.
Well, if we were dealing with robots, I could say my trust would be 100%, but we are not, because they're only as good as the people that
Well,
program them.
years
So-
ago, before we had Fasano, we were doing this. Okay, approval, denial, But once we became quasi judicial,
I never knew about
then
that.
we,
I didn't know we were.
then these processes all of a sudden, planning commissioners had to be
With Fasano.
amateur
I
lawyers.
think he said he knew
And
Mr. Fasano.
so what you're suggesting here
That's
is
a very interesting court case.
pretty
Very
much legal,
interesting
in my
Is
judgment.
it over with someday?
Necessary.
Yeah, Fasano's over, yeah.
Okay, the
And-
final bullet point here is implementing the state requirement for expedited processing for projects that qualify as affordable.
And there's a definition for that.
Yeah, it specifies, and this is on page
I really,
223.
talk about getting a rock in my shoe.
Bottom of page
When the government
223.
gets involved in telling a local government charter, home rule, what they have to do because they don't have any faith that we're gonna do it ourselves, I find this completely objectionable, not because of the topic, but the way that it was done.
And the courts are gonna sort
Because of
that
this
out.
legislature.
Expediting anything says to me, I wanna look at that. If it's expedited, what's going on that's not transparent, that we are not seeing because they get some special exemption? And I don't think anybody should have a special exemption. If it's a project that's affordable, it should meet every requirement that everybody else, like I said, why should people who have to live in affordable housing have to live in crappy housing? I don't think that's right.
And it's only 20 days faster.
Yeah, well, is it?
That's according to a 100-day,
Is there an appeal process for an expedited review?
process instead of a 120-day land use
See, I
decision.
think that puts an undue burden on staffs. I think it's not fair. Why do they get to go to the head of the line and somebody else doesn't? I'm just saying out there in the public, I'm supporting staff, that they need to have all the time that they need. I don't think people should get special treatment because they've got this type of housing or
Is
that
this
type of housing.
implementing an ORS?
I know,
Okay,
that's why I'm not a big fan of,
yeah,
The speaker.
okay. Last slide.
and where is that?
Sorry, that was the page 223, section 1750060C, 5.
Once determines that a project is complete enough to process? That's C.
Yeah, so it's part of the completeness review and then the 120-day requirement to, once that application's complete, we have to make a decision within 120 days, except in this case, it would be shortened to 100 days. If the project has at least 50% of the units sold or rented to households with incomes equal to or less than 60% of the median family income for Clackamas County.
Wow.
How do you know that at the time the application is filed that they're rented or filed?
The burden would be on them to prove
They'd
it.
have to prove it.
Because if
Because
it
they're
ain't
gonna-
built, how are they renting or taking money for something that
Well,
doesn't exist? I don't get
Projects like
that.
that, part
I
of
don't
their
get that.
lending requirements gonna stipulate it, I think, you
Because they
know.
put out those housing lists and say, okay, you get to be in this housing, but you gotta be on this list. That makes no sense to me.
And then they would record a covenant that makes that permanent.
Does that equate to E equals MC squared?
It's close.
Yeah. How in the heck do you administer?
A 100-day period applies in place of the one.
Our legal staff thinks it's something we can manage, so we can manage
We
it.
have to.
So we have to.
We have no choice.
Finally, other changes to the uses and zones, police stations would now be listed as a conditional use in the institutional district. Hotels and motels would be a permitted use in the mixed-use corridor district.
And they
And
weren't before?
they weren't.
No. Not funny.
Odd. Mixed-use
What's the
downtown,
difference between a police station and any other institutional use?
it's just not listed as a.
It's not listed, thank you. In the zoning code, for conditional uses in residential zones, it lists emergency facilities, including police and fire, over and over and over. When you get to the institutional zone, it just says, fire. It doesn't say the police part of
Can't have
it.
any police, and
And
that's in an institutional zone or a residential zone?
so in residential, it's conditional use with them two together. And then in institutional, it just says fire and it doesn't say police anywhere. It also has under condition, courts and things like that are permitted. So, self-serving this one.
In an institutional zone? Courts are allowed?
Yeah, courts are listed in there. Sorry. It's just fire stations are listed as a conditional use. And since police and fire are coupled all those other times, I thought it made sense to put police as a conditional use in the institutional zone where it's silent on police. But it talks about courts and it
Does it
talks
say
about fire
police stations or
departments.
does it say public safety and so on?
It says police stations. So it's consistency, but also, I mean, in very full transparency, we're looking at putting a police station in the institutional zoning district. And the institutional zoning district does not mention police stations anywhere as being permitted, conditional, or prohibited, but since it's coupled with,
What about other
Fire.
public facilities?
Those are
we're not touching those.
still listed, but this is just being more
Do
explicit.
we have the institutional zone in this?
Yeah, let me find it for you. If you want to keep going, Pete, I'll
Okay.
shout it out when I.
So mixed use downtown currently has a sort of a qualitative requirement for landscaping. It doesn't have a minimum landscaping requirement. The idea was that you've got existing buildings and existing sites that are urban and built out. And future development is going to be urban and built out as well. So, but this would require a minimum of 5% landscaping in the design district, which is the overlay within which the Masonic building is, and those areas.
The institutional zone starts on page 205. The conditional uses are listed on page 206.
Okay. And that's everything for now. The upcoming schedule for the next open house we will be having next week before the public hearing, August 27th. And we'll have our 5th work session with you at 5:30 before the public hearing.
Is there a reason why we have to meet that early?
No,
I apologize. The
Elizabeth
reason I was
Decker-
late is that I ate dinner because if I came
Okay.
here without any food,
Oh, yeah.
it would not be good. It would not be good for anybody, including me.
We have it so you guys have enough time to speak.
Elizabeth
Right.
will be here.
Elizabeth, our consultant, will be here. We've narrowed down the list of stuff that you want to talk about again to a few different items, I think.
Yeah, this will be an opportunity to recap the things we've talked about already, and get into a little more detail as to specifics with Elizabeth. And
I can provide dinner.
The problem is that I have a meeting on the 4th Thursday that meets from 4 to 6, and I have to be there.
okay,
I told him that there's a critical vote that's occurring that I need to be there for.
Do you want to just do the work session from 6 to 7 and then hearing at 7? I
We're
mean,
going to continue it anyway, so.
we are proposing to continue, I mean, we're not asking for a decision,
I told him
obviously.
that I needed to get it on the first part of the agenda, so why don't you give me till the end of the week so I can contact the staff and tell them that we need to get this on the agenda, like shortly, like between 4 and 5 at the other meeting.
We're open to whatever first off, thank you to the planning commission
Yeah.
for coming out the last few Mondays.
Well, that's
putting up
about
with our
time.
additional
I mean-
meetings.
You
Bob,
guys,
you're
the
getting a raise,
amount,
man.
the 327-page document that you've read, plus all the other matrix, and
I'm gonna
if you
be
guys
honest with
want a
you.
half hour, you can have a half.
Well,
Whatever works for you.
I
We
just have been
appreciate
trying
it.
to carve out some quiet time so I can read this.
Oh, we were supposed to read that?
I know, Bob.
I appreciate all of the
Bob, aren't you
time.
putting this under your pillow so that you can just absorb it by osmosis? Because I've heard that works.
Yeah.
I mean, we've met with almost all of you guys out, I mean,
It's in-
like,
I can't
We
read.
need to read it by next Monday. The 27th is the deadline. You
the
don't have to have
time
it
you
read
guys are
today.
putting in.
Well,
You
I'm
got-
flogging my way through it, but I
And
also
then-
have to live too.
Also, Pete, do you want to give them the timeline for when we're gonna publish the next? When do we want to publish the next draft code that incorporates these changes that we've discussed through the 4 work sessions?
Make that a different color.
When's my deadline?
Oh, okay.
Maybe yellow, I don't know. Yellow's easy. Is
Different
yellow the one
color?
that runs out of ink fast.
Oh,
Yellow,
we can do a different color.
Yellow's not good.
Blue?
blue, might be blue,
Yeah,
like a dark blue.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so Friday?
Yeah, so we were planning, oh, you
Hmm?
want to talk about it?
Is that gonna be delivered to our doorstep?
What's a work session? Talk about?
Actually, we're gonna put them all in the back of your Volvo and you're gonna deliver them. You're gonna drive up to the city hall and they're gonna throw them out just like newspaper
Yeah.
with a,
Right,
tied with string.
Right, yeah.
We can give it to them on the 27th. Rather than drive around.
I just wanna have a fighting chance to finish reading
Yeah, that makes
this.
sense, we're gonna continue it anyway.
Well, I've
Okay,
shoved all the stuff
So,
into next week.
on the 27th, we're gonna give you,
I
here's my
basically-
proposal.
I basically got,
We're gonna give you a new packet on the 27th, because that's gonna be continued anyway, and you'll have time to review everything up until now. Then,
I'm not even done with this one,
okay? But we'll have,
but you're gonna confuse me
I'm
because
gonna
I've
put
got all
blue
my little
ink on it.
scribbles and notes and
and put a version on the bottom that says it's, this version. How's
Well,
that?
give us all your scribbles and notes,
I haven't even finished
Or
sorting them out myself. But see, I got the super
whatever you guys
industrial
want to
binder.
do, but we'd like to kind of set a point in the future for you to get us any written feedback you want to give us.
Is that still the
By Monday.
27th
Yeah. we're-
today?
I'm not
Are
gonna
we
get this,
looking to
I'm not
move
getting
that
this
one
done
way
by
a little
Monday, I
bit?
can tell you that. Unless some miracle happens.
I'm asking.
Can I get it done by Monday?
Well, I'm asking when a better date is.
I don't know. I'm setting aside time every day to look
Yeah.
at this.
Let's shoot for Monday, and then we will take your comments in and eventually know that there will be another draft out that incorporates all your comments.
Okay.
And we've been writing code changes based off your feedback. If it's
Yeah, I don't
anything.
want to, it would be better to get as many comments at one point in the future than rather than
I totally
piecemealing
get
it.
that, but
Yeah.
this is,
I get it.
I'm trying to read it early in the day because when I started reading this at night,
You fall asleep.
yep, that is not good. You do not want to wake up on the couch with your neck like that. It's not good.
That's why we gave you guys a month, like a long time to sort of get into that knit.
I am doing the best I can under the circumstances that have been laid on my plate.
So if you guys can give us your comments by Monday, that would be greatly appreciated. If you need,
Monday
I
at
mean, you're volunteers, so do the best you can.
10:30.
I'm doing the best I
We'd
can.
hope for, we'll shoot for the moon.
So I need to come in and finish reading I started reading the stuff on the comp plan online. Oh my God, that's even worse. It's like I started up here and then I had a question about something down there, and then I put it on 2 pages and I was going back and forth, and then I just drove myself crazy, and then I just shut it down. I said, I can't do this.
Reading something online is not,
It's horrible.
it's not good.
Are we ready to adjourn?
Well, you got any?
So
no
I'm gonna
public
come in and
comments,
get,
so-
like I said, I told Pete I'm willing to pay for whatever sections of the comp plan I need to look at because I just can't deal with it online.
Well, as I mentioned, we did publish our initial recommended findings, where we've gone through the goals and policies that we think are applicable for this project.
It's
There
on
may
your
be-
email when we get home tonight, right?
Well, the agenda,
Yeah, the
Yeah,
agenda
yeah.
and,
yeah, so that ought to help focus some of it. I tried to really focus on the things that I thought were applicable and not on the ones that weren't, like, forest and farm stuff, so.
It's not. Doesn't that have to do with trees?
Well, it specifically says these are principally applicable outside of UGB, so, But goal 6, goal 7, that's a tree issue, so we're just talking about 4 and 5.
Well, we've got, okay, let me just
3 and 4,
mentally,
sorry.
so we've got goal 1,
There's a table in the recommended findings that
we've got,
has everything on it.
I know,
that
I
I
was
put
trying
in.
to see how good my memory is. I would think goal 2,
Are we, can we adjourn?
public facilities
I
and
want to be
services
cognizant of,
is
it's past 10 o'clock.
somewhere in there.
I guess so.
Do you,
I can't see
Is
that
there a
far
motion
anymore.
to adjourn?
make motion
Yeah.
to adjourn.
Oh, we don't even have a quorum. Okay, I'm adjourning.
Okay.
We don't have a quorum.
the